The Flash from My Hero Academia. Chapter 41. The second horse riding battle is over, let me take a look, huh? What's going on? Mike's voice was full of surprise. And following Mike's astonishment, many spectators who were still discussing the game just now looked over curiously. I saw it on the big screen. It is no surprise that the first place is the team of Li Tian and Yi Yin. However, the second place at this time has become the Hong team, and the Green Valley team's 1 million points have been won by the Hong team at some point. And the third place has now become the Green Valley team. And the fourth place became the Bakugo team. What the hell is going on? Mike's surprised voice came from the radio. During Holy Radiance, what happened? When everyone couldn't keep their eyes open, Yaoyorozu Wan made sunglasses for everyone in the team, and then secretly stole 1 million points from Green Valley's team, so she jumped to second place. Aizawa Shota suddenly opened his mouth to answer. Mike was taken aback, made the sunglasses and stole them secretly. That's right, and then Tokiyami of the Green Valley team. Although the Black Shadow became very weak at that moment, he also took the opportunity to grab a lot of points from the other redundant teams, and finally ranked third. Aizawa Shota he opened his mouth and explained. By the way, the worrying team in fifth place also used some kind of quirks at that time to get the surrounding teams to bring points to him, but they didn't grab as many as Tokiyami. So that's it, you've been staring at the game. No wonder your eyes are so red, I thought you were envious of your students. Mike said clearly. Aizawa Shota's eyes turned cold, and he stared at Mike firmly. Okay, I apologize. Mike quickly waved his hand. TCH, we don't have 18 guys who can act in that situation. Kirishima pouted. That fool. Bakugo gritted his teeth, looked at Green Valley who was holding Tokiyami and crying bitterly. His eyes were full of unwillingness, he actually lost to that guy in Green Valley. After winning the second place, Hong was not so happy, instead he stared at Li Tian with a fierce and frightening gaze. Not only that, in the last minute, almost all the teams that lost points were like this, with ferocious eyes staring at Li Tian and the two who caused all this. After all, the last minute is always the last moment of explosion, and it turned out that because of the deprivation of sight, he couldn't even counterattack. Well, too, we seem to have caused trouble to our classmates. Li Tian squatted in the corner and whispered. Well, it seems so. Yi Yin said, carefully reducing his sense of existence to a minimum, completely disappearing his figure. How about we run away now? With my speed, no one should be able to stop me. Li Tian said quietly. No need, I can actually make people invisible now. Li Tian, you can hide me too. Yi Yin also whispered. Hey, the two over there, although Xiangying doesn't forbid students to fall in love, but if they flirt, it's still troublesome to change 10 places. Niu Yi looked at the two people who were squatting in the middle of the crowd, Zunbao, and shouted. Hi, X2. These two people are completely shameless. Midnight's mouth twitched. Midnight looked at Li Tian and Yi Yin who were vaguely surrounded by more than 30 other people, and complained, but, if they want to lose face, they won't be able to survive now. Haha, it seems that our first classmate Li Tian and Yi Yin had a little accident. In the broadcasting room, Mike gloated. It deserves it. Aizawa Shota made a perfect finish. However, this year's Class A is really strong. The top 4 are almost all taken by Class A. Eraserhead, how did you teach them? Mike suddenly changed the subject and said. Didn't I say that? That's their own strength, Aizawa Shota said impatiently. The voice from the broadcast sounded throughout the audience, and at this time, the audience in the auditorium and the professional heroes who watched the game also reacted, and they all cried out in surprise. Really, look carefully, the top 4 in this horseback riding battle are all students from Class A except for one invention of the support department. There's also the qualifiers. The students in the class are basically at the top. This year's Class A is far ahead of other peers. Sounds like this kept ringing from the auditorium. In the arena, other students except Class A looked at the students of Class A who had become everyone's eyes, their faces changed instantly and their eyes became fierce. The atmosphere has suddenly changed. Kirishima instinctively looked around vigilantly with his hardened arm fisting. Want to fight? Bakugo glanced around, grinned grinningly, his hands kept exploding, and now he is very angry because of losing to Green Valley. What's going on? The eyes of the students around have changed. Yaoyorozu Wan looked around in panic. Boom was even more straightforward, ignoring any reason, just staring at Li Tian in the crowd. Haha, after Class A of Heroes has turned the Heroes Sports Festival into a class show, I'm afraid it will become famous. Mike laughed. There's no need for you to sow discord here. Aizawa Shota twitched his lips, looking at his students who had become the focus below, his eyes still calm, and he didn't think it was a bad thing. Although realistic, but society is like this, I go up and you go down, and you go down and I go up. This kind of stare you face after crowding out others, you should feel it in advance. Aizawa Shota said silently. Okay, the farce is over here. Midnight waved the whip in his hand, looked at the students seriously and shouted, the rules of this competition are that there is no freedom. Behavior is allowed. So, even if you don't want to be reconciled, if you lose, you lose. Don't lose so that people look down on you. At the end, Midnight's voice suddenly became sharper. Cut. The unwilling people curled their lips and withdrew their unwilling eyes. The game in the afternoon will start after the 1-hour lunch break. Disband now, Midnight yelled sharply, then took the lead and turned to leave. Huh, I was scared to death, I thought there would be a fight. The crowd dispersed, and Kutao immediately sat down on the ground. He's innocent, and their team didn't make it to the finals. However, the gazes of those people just now were really menacing and frightening. My legs are so weak. Fortunately, there was no fight. Uraraka wiped the sweat from his forehead, said happily. No, Uraraka, you are more serious than them. However, this time it's really a surprise. The finalists are all from our Class A. Li Tian said with emotion, he didn't do anything, how did he change so much? Invention purpose. I am not. What are you talking about? If it weren't for you and Yi Yin's sudden move, would we have become like this? Kaminari said angrily. I'm sorry, because Xiao Tu wants to attract attention and become the focus of everyone, so we discussed this plan. Li Wei scratched his head and said with a laugh. Little Ishido Cha-Cha Yaoyorozu Asui, I'm sorry. Yi Yin also apologized embarrassedly. It's okay. After all, this is a competition. Uraraka Cha-Cha waved her hand and said. Isn't it normal to use any tactics during the game? Asui also said. That's right, thanks to Yi Yin, my sunglasses battle was a perfect success. Yaoyorozu replied. Everyone. Yi Yin looked at them with emotion. Don't be so grandiose, we care about it very much. Our scores disappeared inexplicably at that time. Kutao jumped up and shouted. If we don't disappear, we won't be able to enter the top 4 Kamineta. Asui made a perfect finish. Great, but, Ishido Mina suddenly hesitated and said, Yi Yin, you glowed so strongly just now, did anyone really see you? Yi Yin, 000, canteen at noon. Except for Lugu, Hong, and Bakugo, the boys in Class A are missing, and everyone else gathers together to meet the fierce eyes around them and eat tremblingly. I seem to know why classmate Li Tian is still so active, less lively, beaten under the gaze of so many people. Kaminari, who was already nervous and sweating, complained. Ah, we know that too. Several other people turned to look at Li Tian and said in unison. I saw that under the fierce eyes of all the students in the entire cafeteria, Li Tian's eating movements were not affected at all, and even, it felt like he was eating even louder. I really admire him for being able to eat under such circumstances. Just sitting here, I can feel chills down my spine. Ojiro Mashirao said with a wry smile. I understand, the real heroes is to dare to face any vicious eyes. Iida suddenly stood up, his face was stunned, and then he straightened his face and looked at the fiercely staring man with a straight face, their crowd. However, I don't know if it was the comfort brought by Iida-san's actions, or those people were timidly stared at by Iida, and everyone suddenly felt that the fierce eyes around him suddenly became much less. At this moment, everyone present seemed to understand a truth, that is. Student Iida, it's really useful. Li Tian sighed with emotion. You actually said it openly. The others looked at Li Tian with shame. The lunch break is over and the afternoon game is about to start. Class A is celebrating this morning's big victory. Teacher 363 Mike said in surprise. What the hell are they doing? Aizawa Shota's mouth twitched. I saw that in the camp of Class A, the girls were all wearing the same costumes as the cheerleaders on the field, and they were holding flower balls in their hands. Beautiful job. Kaminari and Putao laughed. Mineta-san, Kaminari-san. Yaoyorozu growled violently with veins on his forehead. To be fooled by those two people. It's a shame. Jiro Kyoka blushed, and the headphone jack on his earlobe was already swinging, aiming at the two instigators. I'm still going to make cheerleading uniforms. Yaoyorozu looked frustrated. Haha, it doesn't matter to such a thing. Wouldn't it be nice to just relax? Yi Yin didn't care too much, because her 10 years of invisible life made her quite tolerant of such eye-catching things. Xiao Tu, you really like to play. Cha-Cha said with a dry smile. The game in the afternoon has the same routine every year. Although there may be slight differences, it is generally a one-on-one knockout match. Everyone, let's draw lots. Midnight stood beside the prepared lottery box and shouted, the next lottery will determine everyone's lineup for the upcoming entertainment program. Looking at the lottery box, the 14 players present started from the Li Tian team, which was the first place in the last game. Draw lots. The final result is, the first Green Valley vs. Hiroshima, then Bakugo vs. Siro, the winner will decide the final four. In the second round, Tokiyami will play against Uraraka, and then Iida will play against Invention. The winner will decide the final four. The third match is Li Tian vs. Kaminari, and then Yaoyorozu Wan vs. Ashido. The winner will decide the final four. In the end, Hong played against Yi Yin, and the winner advanced to the semifinals. My opponent is Kaminari, and then one of Yaoyorozu Wan and Ashido. As for two, the opponent turned out to be Hong. Leaving slightly frowned. If Yi Yin can rely on flash bombs and invisibility to fight against any other opponent, then the large-scale attack of the ice block can absolutely defeat Yi Yin. It's over here. I'm so unlucky. Yi Yin obviously understood this, and looked at the rankings in frustration. Okay, everyone, the rankings have already appeared, but let's forget about the knockout rounds and enjoy the halftime entertainment. Cheer up! Kei shouted excitedly, jumping up the atmosphere. The first match is Green Valley vs. Hiroshima. Li Tian looked at the two people who had already stood on the ring. If it is said that Green Valley had no choice but to self-mutilate before mastering the full coverage of One for All, then now, Hiroshima's chances of winning are far less than Green Valley. Hey, I've wanted to ask since the first match. Hiroshima hardened his hands, pointed at Green Valley and asked, You, Green Valley, can you master your own quirks? Yeah, Green Valley nodded in a deep voice, but my current control ability can only exert 5% of its power. 5%, it's okay, Hiroshima breathed a sigh of relief. Although he had already guessed, he was completely relieved when he got the answer from Green Valley. You must know that in the training class some time ago, Green Valley threw a punch with full strength without control, the power. He was stunned when he saw it. If Green Valley can't master quirks, or if he has mastered quirks completely, then he is an old birthday boy eating arsenic to seek death. Although I'm sorry, but Green Valley, I won't show mercy. Hiroshima grinned as his fists hardened suddenly and sparks sparked at the collision. Let's all go all out. Lu Gu's eyes were fixed. One for All instantly covered the body surface, a weak electric arc emerged on the body surface, and One for All completely covered it. Whoosh! The battle is imminent. Green Valley kicked hard, and rushed straight towards Hiroshima. Come on! Hiroshima let out a low voice and stood on the spot, directly hardening his body to guard against the arrival of Green Valley. The agility shown by Green Valley in the first game is not comparable to him. And the result is exactly the same. Even if you have mastered the full coverage of One for All, Green Valley has never been a reckless person. When rushing in front of Hiroshima, Green Valley instantly avoided the confrontation with Hiroshima by relying on the super agility covered by One for All and came to the side. Launched an attack. I expected you to be like this a long time ago. The moment Hiroshima was about to be hit, the corner of his mouth curled up, and his whole body hardened in an instant. Boom! Green Valley's fist was directly resisted by Hiroshima, and he stood there motionless, as if he had turned into a rock. It's so hard. Green Valley snorted, and stepped back suddenly, avoiding Hiroshima's counterattack, and then quickly went around to launch another attack. But, no matter how many times, Green Valley's only 5% One for All full coverage, it is difficult to break the hardening of Hiroshima, who is focused on defense. But, Hiroshima is going to lose. Li Tian sighed softly. But isn't the field evenly matched? Kaminari asked a bit strangely. It's the ring, Tokiami said suddenly. LVGU is gradually leading Kirishima towards the edge of the ring with his fierce attack. Quote. That's right. Li Tian nodded, looked at the duel on the field and said, although Green Valley's current strength is not invincible to break through Kirishima's defense, it is still very easy to knock Kirishima away a few steps, so from the very beginning, Green Valley set up this game. So that's how it is. Kaminari watched the battle on the ring, suddenly realized, and then looked contemptuous. You smart people are so dirty. This is called tactics. Tokiami, who doesn't wait for Li Tian to speak, is also regarded as a smart person, directly stepped forward to argue. And the battle on the field is similar to what they analyzed. Kirishima, who was covered by Green Valley's torrential attacks on the field, could only defend with all his heart, and didn't have the mind to pay attention to the fact that he was approaching the edge of the ring, not to mention that Green Valley himself was constantly covering up this point. In the end, when they were still 3 or 2 meters away from the edge of the ring, Green Valley punched out suddenly, and the surge of Rikido contained in the powerful fist made Kirishima, who was used to Green Valley's previous strength, unable to defend in an instant. A straight punch hit Kirishima's hardened heart, and then directly knocked Kirishima out and landed outside the ring. As the referee, Mr. Cement Division also announced the victory of Green Valley as soon as Kirishima came out of the ring. Although it is not gorgeous, the high-speed fight from fist to flesh is also enjoyable for the audience in the auditorium. As for the professional heroes, they are directly eyeing the one who has shown extraordinary combat power in this battle. Green Valley and Kirishima, 2 people. Immediately after the first match, the second match, Bakugo vs. Zero, began. And the result of the battle was over soon. Zero's tape quirks can't play an advantage in this kind of open ring, and Bakugo's blasting quirks is adding that agile skill. Just a series of explosions exploded in the ring, and Zero was directly blown out of the ring. Although it was short-lived, Bakugo's gorgeous blasting quirks and that kind of agile skill during the battle also made the audience excited. Although Zero lost, the professional heroes did not underestimate them, and some people have already started thinking about how Zero's quirks will do heroes' activities. In the third match, Tokiami played against Uraraka, just like Hong played against Yi Yin. This match was almost a battle of complete restraint. Uraraka, who has no other props to use in the arena, only fights in melee combat, while Tokiami's Black Shadow quirks is a perfect mid-range and long-range defensive quirks. Even if Uraraka knew that Tokiami's Dark Shadow was afraid of light because he was a teammate before, it was useless. Not long after the start of the battle, although Uraraka had high fighting spirit, he was easily forced by the shadow and fell off the ring. And in the next fourth match, Iida was the only one who was not a player from Class A, and this match was quite exciting, which made people dumbfounded, different from the wonderful duel in the first match and the second and third matches. Crushed. The beauty of Game 4 is that, as this completely the personal product introduction meeting of the classmate who invented the project. Li Tian couldn't help laughing, although he had already found it funny when he saw this in his previous life, but the live version is completely different. Iida, he, is too upright. Ojiro couldn't help scratching his face when he saw the various equipment provided by Iida's invention project that cooperated with the invention project. Rather than being upright, it's better to say that he is immovable and flexible. The inventor is definitely a character who can do whatever it takes to achieve his own goals. Sitting solemnly on the seat and looking at the ring, Putao-chan said in a deep voice. As soon as these words came out, Li Tian and the friends around him were all stunned, looking at Putao. Their eyes were full of disbelief. Mineta, how could he say such a thing? As Putao's confidant friend, Kaminari couldn't help being suspicious. If Iida wants to win, he can only. Putao still said deeply. Only. Everyone looked at Putao curiously and wanted to hear about Putao. Come on, Iida, kick all the auxiliary equipment that was invented, tear off her clothes, prevent him from hiding the equipment that turns defeat into victory, and then retaliate fiercely. Mineta roared crazily. Boom, be quiet for me, you pervert. Jiro, sitting in the back seat, had a black hair, and directly knocked out the grapes with his earphones. I knew it. Li Tian looked at the moment when Putao fainted, and his eyes also revealed the meaning of, Iida, come on, and couldn't help but sighed speechlessly. Invention and Iida's product development, Ah no, it was a knockout match between the two. Finally 10 minutes later, after Invention explained all the auxiliary equipment in detail, Japan walked out of the ring contentedly and admitted defeat up. And Iida also became the most miserable winner in the history of Xiangyang. And the next match will be the match between Li Tian and Kaminari. Kaminari, this guy seems to have an idea. Li Tian squinted his eyes as he looked at Kaminari, who walked onto the ring without saying a word. Although it looks like Kaminari is a bit frustrated and throws in the towel, but it's really unlucky. I managed to stand on the stage of the knockout round, but in the first round, I faced classmate Li Tian. Kaminari said with a frustrated face, looking at Li Tian pitifully. Classmate Li Tian, can you hit it lightly or not? Save some noodles for us. Mr. Kaminari, you don't look like you've given up. Li Tian said with a chuckle, looking at Kaminari. Kaminari couldn't help but startled, and then said pitifully. I didn't have any idea. After all, Li Tian, your speed is so fast that you can't see it. Really? Li Tian looked at Kaminari with a half smile, and he could probably guess what Kaminari was thinking. Ha! Looking at Li Tian, Kaminari laughed dryly, and turned to Midnight involuntarily. Teacher, why don't you start the competition yet? On the side, perhaps seeing the interesting conversation between the two, Midnight did not rush to announce the start. After Kaminari's almost begging eyes, he announced the start with a smile on his face. And the moment Midnight announced the start, no, it should be said that before Midnight announced the start, thunder sparks visible to the naked eye instantly appeared beside Kaminari. Haha, I won this competition. Kaminari looked at the motionless Li Tian opposite and smiled triumphantly. Student Li Tian, no matter how fast you run, you can't be faster than my thunderbolt. My lightning is the speed of light. If there is anyone in the class who has the hope of defeating you, it's definitely not Bakugo hitting them, but me. I have the ability to attack faster than Li Tian. Standing behind the force field defense wall formed by the lightning arc, Kaminari was extremely proud. Although I have guessed it for a long time, it really is like this. Kaminari, who was hiding in the center of the dense thunder and lightning, couldn't help rubbing his head. Kaminari Denki's quirks are charged and are quirks that unleash lightning. If it is outside the ring, then with Li Tian's reaction speed that is 100 times faster than Kaminari's, it is possible to defeat him before Kaminari uses quirks, or after Kaminari uses quirks, he can dodge his lightning by widening the distance. But here is the ring. He also released the thunderbolt almost as soon as Midnight announced the start, completely refusing to give Li Tian the opportunity to play jet lag. Plus Kaminari has a move of indiscriminate discharge. The money is good, can cover the entire ring, making people feel helpless. There is nowhere to hide. I don't know if I can resist the electricity. Looking at the electric sparks around Kaminari, Li Tian suddenly had the urge to touch it, but he was forgotten in an instant. It's strange not to be afraid of electricity. Li Tian curled his lips. It's not like the Flash hasn't been electrocuted before. Student Kaminari, it seems that you didn't prepare well in your physics class. Li Tian turned his eyes, scratched his head and said, the speed of electromagnetic induction is equal to the speed of light, not that the speed of lightning is the speed of light. The speed of electromagnetic induction is equal to the speed of light. It's not the speed of lightning but the speed of light. What the hell? Kaminari Denki was a little confused. Isn't the speed of lightning the speed of light? Meaning is. Li Tian instantly activated his super speed force and rushed to Kaminari's side. He carried the lightning bolt and sent Kaminari flying out of the ring with a punch. You're too careless. Li Tian looked at Kaminari, who was lying outside the ring, and laughed. The winner is the God. Teacher Midnight announced loudly. Student Kaminari, you should not give me the slightest chance to speak, or give yourself a chance to speak, and then discharge with all your strength. Li Tian jumped down and just fell down. Kaminari on the ground pulled up and said with a smile. You treacherous idiot. Standing up, Kaminari looked at Li Tian with a resentful look on his face. Smart people have dirty hearts. After the game, Li Tian and Kaminari talked and laughed and walked back to the seat of Class A. They are all classmates, and they will not get into a row because of such a trivial matter. Of course, the most important thing is that Kaminari has been pestering Li Tian to ask him about the fact that lightning is not equal to the speed of light. You know, Kaminari can always think that his lightning attack speed can reach the speed of light, and he is proud of it. As a result, after all this happened today, without asking clearly, he felt a little terrified. Li Tian is also a little speechless about Kaminari. A person who uses lightning quirks will be like a physics idiot, thinking that electricity is equal to the speed of light. Obviously, as long as he understands and cares a little bit, he can know things. In the arena, after Li Tian and Kaminari went down, Yaoyorozu Wan and Ishido, who had been waiting for the stage for a long time, also quickly entered the stage. Kaminari. 0W. The showdown between the two women, if we say the most exciting, is still Grape, who has just woken up. The moment he saw the two women on the stage, Putao's brain, which was still confused, instantly woke up, and the speed of operation soared so many times, and he immediately thought of Ishido Mina's ability. Then the battle situation was simulated. Ishido plus. Shut up. Jiro had a dark face. He knew what Putao wanted to shout without even listening. In order not to be embarrassed by the strange eyes of the audience on Friday, he slapped his earphones and passed out. Anyway, Putao doesn't need to compete on stage. Even if he faints for a day, it's no big deal. On the ring, the two women, Yaoyorozu Wan and Ishido, looked at each other solemnly, and gave the order to attack with all their strength in unison. The battle between Yaoyorozu Wan and Ishido is actually just one thing, that is the distance. If the distance is shortened by Ishido, then the possibility of Yaoyorozu Wan losing is greater, but if the distance is widened, the chance of Ishido losing is even greater big. One is constantly producing various weapons to interfere, and the other is constantly secreting acid to dissolve the weapons and shields made by Yaoyorozuan. However, in the end, Yaoyorozu Wan was even better. He found an opportunity to open a short distance, and then quickly made a special acid-resistant catch net to wrap around Ishido layer by layer. 480, although Ishido was still caught, the acid dissolves quickly, but compared with ordinary metals, the dissolution speed is obviously much slower, and was finally thrown out of the ring by Yaoyorozu Wan. 1. The next game is coming. Li Tian hesitated for a while, but then he didn't go to Yi Yin. Faced with this kind of battle that is almost certain to lose, Yi Yin will definitely feel uncomfortable, but Li Tian believes that Yi Yin will not be so fragile, and Li Tian does not believe that Yi Yin will give up so easily. On the ring, Hong has already stepped onto the ring, while Yi Yin's clothes are floating in the air. Having experienced the matter of riding a horse, looking at the transparent Yi Yin, his eyes were extremely solemn, and he dared not underestimate it. Even if I'm restrained, I won't necessarily lose, as long as Yi Yin finds the right time to cheer himself up. Game start. Midnight gave an order. Yi Yin didn't dare to be slow at all, and quickly hit a dazzling beam of light. And Hong also made a quick mistake, knowing that Yi Yin's flash attack was extremely sharp. At the first moment, he closed his eyes and turned around to squat on the ground. The ice quickly spread out from under Hong's feet, quickly freezing the entire arena. Good opportunity. Yi Yin, who jumped up and avoided the moment the ice spread over, looked at Hong's eyes with his back turned to him in midair, and then rushed over quickly. Laugh. An ice wall suddenly rose from behind Hong, protecting Hong firmly, and then another ice wall rose from behind Yi Yin. Not good. Yi Yin was startled, his face changed slightly. Is it a trap? But how did Hong know that he would come to attack him? The next moment, Yi Yin knew it. Hong didn't know that she came back to attack, but dozens of ice walls rose one after another from all over the arena. Perhaps these ice walls are not very attractive, each one is like a large ice spike, but it's so much. Admit defeat. Hong squatted on the ground with his back facing Yi Yin's direction. In this small arena, with my large-scale attack ability, I can slowly find you even without vision. Quote, I admit defeat. Yi Yin was extremely unwilling to admit defeat in a translucent posture between the two ice walls. Boom, classmate wins. Midnight declared bluntly. There was no suspense in this match. After all, one side was the top quirks among the attacking quirks, and it also had the ability to attack in a large range. The other quirks, Toru Hagakure, were not even direct combat type. How could it be compared? Although he lost the game just now, Yi Yin was actually very happy to be able to enter the knockout round. When he returned to the stage, Yi Yin was no longer sad. After the duel between Hong and Yi Yin, the first round of eliminating Yu was over. The second round of competition continued without a break. After all, as a heroes, it is not always possible to face the battle with the best posture. If he hadn't considered that he was a student, otherwise Xiangying would not have invited a young girl to help with the treatment. Chojiu, get the hell out of here. Don't think that you can surpass me by awakening quirks, I will let you know what reality is. As soon as he rushed to the ring, Bakugo angrily pointed at the Green Valley, roared angrily. Ka Zhang. Green Valley looked at the angry Bakugo on the ring and hesitated for a moment, then stepped onto the ring resolutely, looking at Bakugo with burning eyes. Green Valley looked at Bakugo, and couldn't help thinking about the conversation that day in his mind. My quirks are inherited from All Might, which contains the power of All Might and more predecessors. We must not embarrass the predecessors who have guarded justice for generations. Thinking of this, Green Valley's gaze instantly became determined, and his eyes were full of fighting spirit. Xiao Shang, I want to win. Bakugo was stunned, looking at Green Valley's eyes full of fighting spirit. The thread called reason in his mind snapped instantly, and he kept blasting with both palms. It's just a small stone, how dare you speak so shamelessly. Bakugo gritted his teeth, watching the angry flames in Green Valley's eyes almost bursting out. Game start. Smelly Jew, die to me. Bakugo roared, his face extremely ferocious. Here we come. Looking at Bakugo rushing towards him with both palms exploding non-stop, Green Valley's face was extremely calm. After nearly 2 weeks of special fighting training with All Might, Green Valley has long understood that when fighting, except for where to attack next time and how to attack, everything else can only be thought of after the fight is over. One for all coverage, Green Valley let out a soft drink, and a green light glowed on the surface of his body, staring intently at the approaching Bakugo. Go to hell. Bakugo rushed over in midair without thinking, and suddenly pressed down on Green Valley with his right hand. Beef, here we come, hit the right side. Such an idea appeared in Livgu's mind, his body moved instinctively, and he took a step forward to face the rushing Bakugo, and stepped sideways into Bakugo's arms, and then suddenly grabbed Bakugo's outstretched right arm and slammed it hard, directly throwing Bakugo to the ground. Cough. Being thrown to the ground, Bakugo's face was full of disbelief. How could it be? My movements were predicted. After throwing Bakugo down, Green Valley did not take advantage of the victory to pursue, but quickly retreated 2 steps and faced Bakugo defensively. As Midoriya, who knows Bakugo's superior motor nerves very well, he understands that if he just thinks that Bakugo has fallen and the opportunity comes and he chases after him, then in the end, the loser will definitely be him. Skunk, you boy. Sure enough, with Bakugo's roar, his hands suddenly exploded, and the whole person flew up from the fallen state, glaring at Green Valley, and rushed over, unquestionably swung his right hand, accompanied by continuous explosions. Go to hell. Sure enough, it's another slam from the right side. Green Valley looked at Bakugo without any surprise. From kindergarten to elementary school to junior high school to the current high school, following behind Bakugo, Green Valley has seen Bakugo's trick many times, so. Drink. With a light drink, with the body boost brought by One for All's full coverage, Green Valley easily dodged Bakugo's attack, and then, before he could fight back, Bakugo's left hand instantly broke through Green Valley's defense and pressed on Green Valley's chest. Boom. Green Valley was blown out directly. Sure enough, smelly. In the smoke caused by the explosion, Bakugo slowly walked out, looking at Green Valley ferociously. With your motor nerves, it is impossible to predict my movements, so, you just know my fighting habits. That's right. Even if the One for All increase is only 5%, that kind of hasty explosion can't hurt Green Valley at all. Getting up from the ground, Green Valley looked at Bakugo vigilantly. From childhood to big, Kachan, when you get excited, you will launch a slam from the right side. You don't know how many times I have seen it. Swipe right. I've seen it countless times. Bakugo looked at his right hand, and the expression on his face became more ferocious. You kid has been harboring ill intentions since the past. With a roar, Bakugo rushed towards Green Valley directly. Although it seems violent, Xiao Shang's character is absolutely delicate and calm. The kind of prediction that relies on habit doesn't work once, so. Green Valley looked at Bakugo, who was rushing towards him, and his mind was running fast with. What are you thinking, kid? Your favorite right punch is coming. Bakugo roared and swung his right hand down with all his strength. Here we come. Green Valley's eyes flashed, and the whole person made a mistake, flashed directly to the right side of Bakugo, and punched out suddenly. Bang! Bang, bang, Bakugo's left hand suddenly exploded one after another. In midair, Bakugo twisted his whole body, spun half a circle and smashed towards Green Valley. Not good. Lugu's face changed slightly, and his left hand quickly stretched out from the upper side of his right hand, blocking Bakugo's volley and heavy hit, but he couldn't help but took 2 steps back. Come again. Your favorite right hand strike. In midair, Bakugo quickly regained his balance through the explosion of both hands, and rushed towards Green Valley. Xiaosheng's balance ability and maneuverability are really too strong. Lugu's face changed slightly. Even if he is fully covered by One For All, his mobility is far better than that of being able to change directions at will in midair. Bakugo who maintains the balance. In the face of Bakugo's rapid onslaught, Green Valley can only change the battle and retreat, seeing every move. On the arena, 2 figures intersected one after another, and all kinds of tricks and punches collided non-stop, which was dizzying to watch. The audience in the auditorium and the professional heroes were dumbfounded and amazed. Although they have seen the strength of the two before, but in real fights, this level of intensity is also unresponsive. Are they really students? This kind of combat reaction, it is said that the frontline heroes who have been fighting for a long time will believe it. Indeed, especially the Afro, if the green-haired boy still has. If he hesitates at the moment of thinking, the Afro will make a judgment in an instant and then execute it without hesitation. This kind of excellent reaction and execution ability, in addition to a natural genius. Then only the frontline heroes who have been fighting for a long time can rely on rich experience to exercise. Quote. In the auditorium, a very knowledgeable professional heroes made a judgment. The other guy is pretty good too. He doesn't have the reaction power of that explosive head. He can fight to this point by relying entirely on his lack of combat experience and thinking in moments of stagnation. At this level, he should be a genius of the brain school. After he has rich combat experience, he is definitely not inferior to that kid. There are also heroes who praised Green Valley. This year's freshmen are all good seedlings of heroes. Some heroes couldn't help but click their tongues. Oops. LVGU suddenly thought of something while fighting with Bakugo. With a solemn expression, I've been dragged into a protracted war. Looking at Bakugo who was grinning ferociously in front of him, Green Valley's face changed slightly. It looks like you finally found out. Looking at Lugu's expression changing, Bakugo suddenly thought of something, and stopped the onslaught after a long absence, allowing Lugu to take a breath. But Green Valley's face is not the slightest joy. You like to record data and search other people's information so much, then you must know my quirks. Bakugo raised his palms, with a ferocious smile on his face. Sweating a lot. Green Valley looked at the sweat on Bakugo's palm, and his face became completely ugly. Bakugo's quirk's explosion is that the sweat of the palm mutates and secretes an explosive substance similar to nitroglycerin. Can create explosions within the reach of the palm of your hand, so the more you sweat, the stronger Bakugo will be. So, once caught in a protracted war, Bakugo will become stronger as he fights, and finally defeat his opponent with an overwhelming advantage. On the contrary, as a person who has only mastered One For All full coverage for less than a month, the longest time he can maintain one FBRA full coverage in fierce battles is only about 10 minutes. After all, is the time too short? Li Tian, who was sitting on the stage, frowned slightly looking at the Green Valley that was almost reaching its limit. Even if he proposed to launch One For All with all his strength and then not trigger it, so that Green Valley's body gradually got used to the quirks of One For All, and the educational strength of All Might's love also began to improve by leaps and bounds, but after all, it was only a month since Green Valley started training One For All. Arrive. Facing Bakugo, being able to achieve this level is already pretty good, not to mention. After playing Xiaosheng for so long before, he didn't become stronger. Is he just misleading me? Lugu's face turned ugly. It seems that you have figured it out. Bakugo grinned, with an extremely arrogant smile on his face. Now, I will send you to hell. With both palms facing back, Bakugo heard the sound of an explosion, and the whole person rushed towards Green Valley in an instant. It's so fast. It's completely different from just now. Green Valley was shocked instantly. He could barely adapt to Bakugo's attack speed before, but now barely blocked Bakugo's attack, and then Green Valley was hit by Bakugo's next combo. Oops, my body can't react. After being hit by Bakugo's heavy blow, Green Valley's vision has begun to blur, and her control over One for Owl's full coverage has also begun to weaken. What's wrong, Shirju? Don't you want to win? Let me see if you win. Bakugo kept attacking, but Green Valley's defense was getting weaker and weaker, and the weaker it was, the weaker it was. More hits by Bakugo, and in the end it's like a vicious circle. It's no power. Green Valley's eyes were full of black smoke and explosion flames, and there was no other sound besides the explosion, and his consciousness gradually became blurred. This guy. Bakugo looked at the unsteady Green Valley standing on the spot, curled his lips in disdain, put his hands in front of him, palms facing each other, and then, a violent explosion rang out, because deliberately adjusted the angle relationship. The explosion wind generated by the explosion staggered and rushed towards Green Valley, directly blowing it out, hitting the wall of the venue heavily, and then falling to the ground. Bakugo-san wins. Midnight announced loudly. On the side, the rescue team quickly stepped forward, carried Lu Jiyu onto a stretcher and sent him to the infirmary. In the arena, Bakugo watched LVGU being carried away. His face was full of disdain, but no one saw that his hands in his trouser pockets were shaking imperceptibly. On the ring, Tokiami and Iida have already stepped on the ring, while Bakugo is standing alone in the passage. Is it really good not to go to the recovery girl to have a look first? After all, it won't be long before it's your turn to fight again. Li Tian walked over and looked at Bakugo with his hands in his pockets and said. Bakugo's face turned ugly at first, and he snorted arrogantly and said, "Don't worry about it. Sure enough, your blasting has basically reached its limit in the battle with Green Valley." Li Tian shrugged his shoulders, and he was right. It's still early. Bakugo turned his head and snorted coldly. Hey, girls can be cute when they are arrogant, but if boys are arrogant, they are not cute at all. Li Tian scratched his head helplessly. No. Bakugo squinted his eyes and asked, that guy, Chiku, you were the one who guided him. I have seen him ask you questions before. It's not considered teaching. I just told him some of my thoughts about Quirk's control. Li Tian rubbed his chin and said. Sure enough, it's you. Bakugo stared, completely ignoring all the words that followed, and only listened to the first word, why did you guide Kongju's family? The why. I said it all, but I just told him some ideas about Quirk's control. Li Tian rolled his eyes and said, as for the reason, after all, it's not like you don't know about your bad competitive personality. If you don't find someone to stop you if it is a knife, then you will definitely stare at me, and it happened that Green Valley came to ask how to control Quirks, so. Don't think that I will let you go, whether it's a long time, a yin and yang face, and you, a speedy, I will blow you all up. Hey, you work hard. I'm going to prepare for the next game. Li Tian waved his hand and walked towards the waiting room. In the ring of the arena. Although it is far less intense than the super-fast tension between Green Valley and Bakugo in the last match, the battle between Tokiami and Iida is also quite fierce. Iida's engine is fully turned on, and his running speed and kicking strength cannot be underestimated, while Tokiami's Black Shadow is both offensive and defensive, with no dead ends. If there are no waves in this game, it will be destined to become a long battle. In the corridor of the stadium, Li Tian stopped in his tracks, looking at the figure blocking him with a frown. Endeavor. Li Tian couldn't help but wondered, he couldn't find Green Valley like in the original book, come and talk to him about those ridiculous declarations. I watched your game, very good Quirks. Endeavor looked at Li Tian's indifferent opening, if nothing else happens, you will meet my pediatrician in the main round. It's very possible. Li Tian nodded and replied, why, do you want to ask me to release the water? My son, Boom, he shoulders the mission of surpassing All Might, so before that, he will not lose to anyone, including you. Endeavor said without the slightest wave. And then, what's the matter with you? Just to talk about this. Li Tian looked at Endeavor and couldn't help feeling amused. A second heroes came here to wait for him, just to say these words. Should he say that he can't communicate with people? Or should he say that he is too competitive? Endeavor stared at Li Tian as soon as his eyebrows that were burning with flames fluttered. Having the mission of surpassing All Might is really a lofty ideal, but what kind of mission do you have to surpass All Might? There is no connection between not losing to your peers. Li Tian couldn't help shaking his head as he said. Just now, was there a teenager who was destined to surpass All Might and lost to his peers? Then he walked past Endeavor. Li Tian didn't pay attention to this uncle who surpassed All Might and became a demon. No wonder Endeavor is like that though. All Might, the title of the symbol of peace, even faintly had the title of the world's #1 heroes in its heyday, but Endeavor is only the second heroes here in Neon, and it is at best first class in the world. The standard is far from super class, let alone All Might standing at the top of super class. Being oppressed by such an invisible figure for many years, for him who is extremely competitive, it's no wonder he isn't crazy. Ask for flowers, it's really. By the way, Hong has met me this time, so he has no way to fight Green Valley, so that means that Hong is still a child with super problems, and he is still the kind who has no chance to heal. Li Tian couldn't help it. Scratched his face. Is it possible that after educating LVGU, you still have to correct him? After thinking about it for a moment, Li Tian shook his head resolutely. If this kind of thing needs my help, what do you need teachers to do? It is the teacher's responsibility to pull back students who have strayed into the wrong path. And Li Tian is also good at fooling people in sarcasm. The more Li Tian persuades the words of redemption, the more he will not let it go, but the more it will be twisted. When the time comes, tell Aizawa-sensei the inside story about the Endeavor's family, and then just wait for Aizawa-sensei to talk about it. Thinking of the solution, Li Tian instantly felt a lot lighter all over his body, and could barely walk. Much lighter. At this time, there was news that the game was over and that he was going to the ring. Well, it's Tokiami. Li Tian nodded slightly when he heard the winner announced on the radio. Indeed, compared to Ida's engine quirks, Tokiami's Sombra's offensive and defensive integration is somewhat more conducive to combat. Stepping onto the ring, Li Tian greeted Yaoyorozu Momo, who was already waiting in full force. 0. One side is Li Tian, who has been crushing everyone with ease since the beginning of the competition, and the other side is Yaoyorozu Momo, a beautiful and intelligent girl. How will the battle between the two sides develop? Speaking of which, Mike couldn't say any more. Yaoyorozu Momo's head full of black lines. The game begins. Aizawa Shota decisively grabbed the microphone and announced loudly. Student Li Tian, to be honest, I can't think of a way to beat you in the ring, but I hope I can see you. You go all out, can you? Li Tian. Yaoyorozu Momo pulled out his arm from the cuff and iron rod. Please seriously. Full strength. Li Tian thought for a moment, then nodded. Of course this kind of request is acceptable. Call _. Yaoyorozu Momo took a deep breath and gave a low breath, holding a long stick and rushing towards Li Tian directly. Do you go all out? Li Tian looked at Yaoyorozu Momo who was rushing forward. Because of the equipment, the running speed is definitely not considered to be going all out, so only Speed Force mode. Li Tian took a step forward, entered the Speed Force mode instantly, and then rushed towards Yaoyorozu Momo with several steps, holding the long stick held by Yaoyorozu Momo with both hands, and then exerted a little force. He directly threw Yaoyorozu Momo up and threw it out of the ring. Yaoyorozu came back to his senses, feeling the involuntary shock of weightlessness in midair. Obviously last second he was still rushing towards Li Tian, but the next second, no, the next moment, appeared in midair. Although Li Tian exerts force in the mode of super speed force, he does not use speed to generate force. However, the recent exercise has also made Li Tian's own strength have made great progress. The Yaoyorozu Momo who was thrown away was just slightly stunned, and there was no time to make props, and he was thrown out. Sight. Student Li Tian wins. Midnight referee shouted dutifully. Sure enough, student Li Tian is really too strong. With that kind of speed, there is no thought of confrontation at all. No, it must have failed the moment the thought of confrontation was born. Yaoyorozu Momo fell to the ground, and couldn't help but smile. Although she said she was going all out, she had also seen the scene where Li Tian threw a softball in the Quirks Mastery test after admission. Yaoyorozu Wan himself also knew that if Li Tian had gone all out just now, he would not have been flying out slowly, but would have been smashed into the wall directly, and he might even have died directly. This time, I will defeat you. Looking at Li Tian coldly, he spoke in a deep voice with a surge of cold air. The battle between Bakugo and Tokiami did not last long. Although it seemed reckless and irritable, in fact Bakugo had a very delicate character. After just fighting a few times, he clearly noticed that Tokiyami's weakness was his explosive fire. Afterwards, after a few strong attacks, Tokiyami was defeated, and now, the match in the ring is the last match of the semi-finals, Li Tian vs. Hong. Really, why do you all keep aiming at me? Li Tian scratched his head with helplessness on his face. Looking at Hong's eyes, he knew that Hong was also like Kaminari, and he had probably been thinking about how to defeat him for a long time. Methods. Wrong. Everyone in the class should have basically thought about how to defeat him, it's just that some people figured it out, and some people didn't. It's like Yaoyorozu Wan, who said before the battle that she couldn't think of a way to defeat Li Tian in the ring. After all, with Li Tian's speed, it is impossible to give her the slightest time to create items. On the side, the midnight referee looked at the situation on the field, and without waiting any longer, he decisively announced the start of the game. Laugh. In the direction of the boom, at the moment the game was announced to start, a large amount of freezing air came out from the 320 of the boom, and quickly spread to the entire stadium. It really is like this again. Li Tian stood on the spot scratching his head, looking at the smooth and almost reflective ice ground under his feet and the cold air that enveloped the entire arena and invaded Li Tian non-stop. When facing Li Tian, whose speed is far faster than his own, all his classmates can think of as this kind of attack, and then limit Li Tian's speed or directly bring the entire ring into the attack range. However, this is indeed the way to deal with speedsters. If the speed force is not included, the speedster is just an ordinary person. If you don't use speed force, even a small bullet can kill Li Tian life. Therefore, a large-scale attack, even if the attack power is not strong, is very dangerous for the speedster. Okay, it's so cold. The entire arena seems to have entered the cold winter from midsummer in an instant. In the broadcasting room, Mike shivered on purpose and said tremblingly. The same is true for the auditorium, although there is some distance from the ring, and there is no real cold in winter, but most of the audience came in summer clothes. It was suddenly cold, and even those professional heroes basically all hairy. As for the side of the ring, Midnight took a coat from somewhere and wrapped it around his body. It seems that you have also undergone quite rigorous training. Li Tian moved his feet, feeling the unbelievably smooth ice layer slipping under his feet. This level of smoothness is not something that can be achieved just by thinking about it. There is also the surrounding freezing air. This kind of severe cold air in a large area cannot be displayed casually with a slap on the forehead. Freezing air is fine, but he can't skate on this ice layer. There is also this kind of hardness, which is obviously specially strengthened. Unless I use the inertia of the speed force to stamp my feet step by step, I can't run at all. But if I run like that, I'm afraid I can't run very far. My legs stamp yourself first. Li Tian thought to himself, thinking quietly. You use the other half's ability. Li Tian looked at Hong and said. Watching Li Tian remain silent, with a thought, countless ice edges and thorns quickly appeared under his feet, surging towards Li Tian rapidly. Sure enough, Li Tian looked at Hong's attack and nodded in understanding. The burden of this level of freezing air on the body is not much smaller than that of the huge iceberg created by the full force. If the temperature of the other half of the body is not used to thaw, I am afraid that the half of the body is completely frozen by the frost and cannot move, let alone it is said that it is using ice of this size to attack. I'm not as stubborn as I imagined. Is it because I have defeated him before, so I am more competitive than others? No, although I used the ability of the other half of my body, it only relieved the body temperature. On the contrary, this environment, the restraint on the flame is obviously more serious. Li Tian looked at Hong Si and thought. Looking at the oncoming ice, Li Tian moved his feet, took a step forward, and then directly entered the speed force mode, aiming at the ground in front of him and punching out. Boom! With the help of the huge inertia of the speed increase in the speed force mode, Li Tian smashed the ice layer several meters below his feet with a punch, and lost the smooth ice surface with minimal friction. Li Tian finally regained the feeling of standing firmly, and smiled in the direction of Hong. Just like other students would think about how to deal with him, of course he would also think about how to deal with various traps in reverse. Oops! Seeing Li Tian smiling towards him, Hong felt a chill on his face, wanting to mobilize the cold to mend the broken ice layer, but the moment Hong just had such an idea. There seemed to be dozens of Li Tian figures in front of his eyes, and every Li Tian was throwing his fist at the iceberg that was condensing in front of him and ready to attack. Boom, boom, boom. Dozens of roars formed a line, and the iceberg was directly shattered by Li Tian's dozens of punches, sending ice cubes and ice debris flying all over the sky. Immediately afterwards, there was a flash in front of Hong's eyes, and when he came back to his senses, he had already appeared on the sidelines. Looking at the scattered ice shards on the ring and the broken ice stretching all the way, the ground couldn't help being silent. The winner is classmate Li Tian. Midnight, who had been prepared for a long time, shouted directly. At this time, the audience in the auditorium also came back to their senses, and many audience members complained dissatisfiedly. After all, the battle that ended in an instant, they just relaxed a little, and it was over. Didn't they see anything at all? Only the first-class professional heroes looked at the field solemnly. Although it was short, in the eyes of these knowledgeable people, this game is definitely not inferior to the previous game between Green Valley and Bakugo. Whether it's the fine control of the ice floor made by Boom, or the freezing air that instantly turns the surroundings into cold winter, they are all enough to make their eyes shine. As for Li Tian, it was even more amazing. Whether it was the way they dealt with the icy ground under their feet, the strength of the fist that smashed the iceberg, or the terrifying speed that appeared in front of their eyes at that moment like a clone, they were all amazing. As soon as that kid graduates, he will definitely become a first-line hero quickly. This is the common judgment made by the first-line heroes present. In the auditorium, Endeavor looked at the empty arena with an ugly expression, turned around and left with a cold snort. After Teacher Midnight announced the victory, Li Tian also stepped off the ring. The final match between him and Bakugo will start in about 10 minutes. These 10 minutes are for the teacher of the cement department to tidy up the ring and give Li Tian a break. It's unreasonable. In the passageway, Hong, who had already left the stage, stopped Li Tian from speaking in a deep voice. Unreasonable. Li Tian was taken aback. What is unreasonable? I have tested that in this freezing air, the temperature will drop rapidly to about -35 degrees. With which kind of clothes, your body temperature will drop rapidly, and your body will quickly become stiff and difficult to move. Hong frowned tightly wrinkled, looked at Li Tian and said in a deep voice. Even he relies on the other half of his body to maintain the temperature, so as not to affect his body due to the cold. That, a little skill. Li Tian shrugged. If it was on stage, he would not be so stupid as to explain his ability, but off stage, it doesn't matter. Shivering. Trembling. Hong frowned. Yes, shivering generates heat. Li Tian nodded. I looked like I wasn't moving on the stage, but in fact my body was constantly shivering super fast, providing me with heat to maintain my body temperature. This can be regarded as a little trick that Li Tian accidentally discovered when developing moves. Because Li Tian wanted to develop the Flash's ability to use the speed force to vibrate the molecules of his body to pass through objects. As a result, this ability has not been developed yet, but he has mastered many interesting tricks of the speed force. Looking at Hong, who was lost in thought, Li Tian shrugged and turned to leave. Not long after Li Tian left, Endeavor's figure appeared in the passage and walked towards Hong. How does it feel to lose? Endeavor asked coldly. Hearing Endeavor's voice, he suddenly raised his head, stared at Endeavor firmly, with no hidden hatred for Endeavor in his eyes, and said coldly, "What are you doing here? Your opponent is very strong, you can never defeat him with the power of ice. Only with my power and fire can I defeat him," Endeavor said in a deep voice with an indifferent face. Flame, Hong sneered, ignoring Endeavor and walking over directly, preparing to leave along the passage. Seeing that I didn't care about Hong's actions, I turned my back to Hong, and said to myself, your classmate's speed is so fast, it's so fast, even All Might doesn't have that kind of 1.3 speed, but it is not without flaws. Boom's footsteps stopped. Every time he attacks, his speed will slow down for a moment and then speed up again. Although it is very short, it does exist. At that moment, he can suddenly see many afterimages of him as proof. Endeavor said lightly. Besides finding ways to reduce and limit his speed and wide range of attacks, this short moment will be his only weakness. If it is me standing on the ring, then I will use flames to protect my body, making he couldn't move me out of the arena, force him to attack, and then set him ablaze with flames at the moment the opponent's attack appeared, and then completely defeated him with the flames that covered the entire arena. Come to my office after graduation, and I will teach you how to defeat him with flames. Endeavor turned around and held out his hand to Hong. Hong was silent. Although he hated and disdained his father Endeavor, he had to admit his father's rich experience as a first-line hero and admitted that what his father said was very reasonable. But, I'll beat him with ice. Hong whispered indifferently, then walked forward without moving his head, and disappeared from Endeavor's sight. On the ring, Li Tian and Bakugo faced each other, waiting for the moment when the start would be announced. Bakugo gritted his teeth and stared at Li Tian with a look of unwillingness. Regarding Li Tian's speed, he has no way to deal with it in a formal duel in the ring. Different from Kaminari and Boom, who can launch electric current and ice with a single thought, Bakugo's explosion must be detonated by the sweat on the palms of his hands, and at Li Tian's speed, there is no chance for him to catch it. And just now when Li Tian and Hong faced each other in the arena, he was also watching from the sidelines. Not to mention Li Tian's speed so fast that he couldn't react, even the freezing air that bang was useless to Li Tian, but it was extremely restrained to him. If he was dragged by the freezing air, if he was involved in the protracted battle that he was originally best at, then in the end, he might not even be able to secrete the sweat of the explosion. Bakugo's fists turned white. No matter who he is facing now, he is not sure of winning, and the chance of losing is obviously even greater. The game begins. An order came. Call. Taking a deep breath, Bakugo forced himself to calm down and entered the fighting mode. That fool. Bakugo gritted his teeth and glared at Li Tian, who stood still. What an eyesore. Bakugo roared in his heart, waving his palms around, and the sound of explosions kept coming. The smoke caused by the explosion quickly covered Bakugo and quickly spread towards the entire ring. Hide your figure. Li Tian squinted his eyes watching Bakugo's movements. If it is a good idea to use smoke bombs to hide your figure when facing a villain who is too fast to attack, then facing a speedy person like Li Tian, it is equivalent to fighting against a villain who is too fast to attack. Under the condition of losing sight, the reaction speed is faster than that of the speedster, and 18 is not too bad. Go to hell. Before Li Tian had other thoughts, Bakugo's figure suddenly rushed out of the smoke not far from Li Tian, rushing towards Li Tian. How come? Li Tian looked at Bakugo rushing out in surprise. Hearing the sound and smoke, Bakugo should be behind the smoke. Before he had time to think about it, Li Tian instantly entered the Speed Force mode. In the world of Speed Force, Li Tian looked at Bakugo, who was floating in the midair in front of him, and was struck by the strong wind through the explosion of his palms. With a horizontal stroke, it has been pushed out. Boom! A violent explosion sounded, and Li Tian's whole body was directly blown out and fell to the ground. On the other side, Bakugo was also blown out and hit the ring heavily. Just now, although Li Tian was blown out, Li Tian himself didn't suffer any serious injuries, only his right palm was scorched black. Ha ha, cough, cough cough. Bakugo on the other side coughed violently and couldn't help laughing wildly. All have explosion scars. Medical team, the medical team is ready. Midnight saw Bakugo's injuries and immediately shouted to the side, ready to rush up. What the hell is going on here? Li Tian, who has been known for being crushing and powerful since the sports festival, was blown out. Could it be that Bakugo caught up with Li Tian's speed at just a moment ago? In the radio room, Mike's exaggerated voice sounded. There was also a lot of discussion in the auditorium, let alone ordinary audiences, even some not so powerful professional heroes could not understand. Eraserhead, did you see what happened just now? Mike asked softly. Just now, Li Tian was careless. Aizawa Shota said lightly. Bakugo obviously set up a trap in the cloud of smoke, waiting for Li Tian to set up the trap and the result. It's clear at a glance. But, too messy. Aizawa Shota's voice was serious, and the cold light in his eyes flickered, and he was already thinking about how to deal with Bakugo after the game. Li Tian looked at Bakugo, who was struggling to stand up on the other side with complicated eyes, and said in a deep voice, aren't you afraid of death? As Aizawa Shota said, he was calculated by Bakugo with the trap he set. In that cloud of smoke, Bakugo did 3 things in total. First, he put the sweat from his palms on the ring to control it remotely, making Li Tian surprised that Bakugo was still far away. Second, he put the sweat from his palms on his body. The third is to take the initiative to step forward, using himself as a bait for Li Tian to beat. Dead. Bakugo spat out a mouthful of blood. Even though his body was seriously injured, his face was still extremely arrogant. I just can't see your high-ranking attitude, as if you don't pay attention to anything. Super upset. From the first game, with a calm face, he easily won the first place in the 2 games. The knockout round is also the same. He waited so high and waited for others to make a move, and then attacked. Who do you think you are? All Might. Bakugo completely ignored the injuries on his body, glaring at Li Tian ferociously and roaring. Is that so? Li Tian looked at Bakugo and couldn't help but shook his head, then turned to look at the referee Midnight and said, Mr. Midnight, let the medical team carry Bakugo away. First he was hit by me, and then he hard-wired himself zero-distance explosion. He should not have a few good ribs and internal organs now. Hearing Li Tian's words, Midnight turned to look at Bakugo, frowned, looked at him twice, and then signaled the medical team to go up and check. After the initial diagnosis, the medical team's complexion changed drastically, and before they even had time to inform, they directly moved Bakugo onto a stretcher and quickly carried him away. And Midnight on the side also received the notification about Bakugo after announcing the winner Li Tian, and his expression changed instantly. If it wasn't for Li Tian's quick reminder and dawdling for a while, Bakugo's life might not be saved. In the subsequent award presentation, Bakugo was not able to attend due to injury, which also attracted a lot of attention. After all, the last game was so strange. Although the closing ceremony of the first grade of the Hero Sports Festival due to the Bakugo incident caused some chaotic noises, it ended safely without any accidents, but the topic caused by this sports festival has not been weakened in the slightest. The heat continued to rise. Whether Class A won the championship or the news of Bakugo's serious injury in the end is like a chicken blood, the heat is rising wildly. And everyone in Class A is also completely famous, especially Li Tian, Lugu Bakugo, and the 4 of them. Originally, they could even become the darlings of the media and superstar figures in a short period of time by virtue of their popularity. 18. Words now. Li Tian, are you okay? Yi Yin worriedly looked at Li Wei's right hand. It's okay. That's why those doctors bandaged it quickly, otherwise my wound would almost heal by itself. Li Tian smiled and raised his right hand, jokingly said. Really? What time are you still joking? Yi Yin worriedly grabbed Li Tian's palm and looked. Of course she knew Li Tian's self-healing ability, but that kind of injury didn't seem like he could heal himself no matter what. Healing. During the match just now, she looked at Li Tian's scorched black palm that was blown away from a distance, and her heart almost jumped out of fright. Really? I didn't lie to you. I can recover from that kind of injury in half an hour at most, and now it's been 29 minutes since the end of the match, and I'll definitely be fine in another minute. Li Tian looked serious. Listening to the first half of the sentence, it was fine, but when he heard the second half, Yi Yin gave Li Tian a blank look, and lowered Li Tian's tightly wrapped right hand. She looked through the gauze for a long time and didn't see the difference. That Bakugo is really, he didn't look like a good person in the past, but now he is playing such a heavy hand in the game. Yi Yin said angrily. Bakugo is still lying in the operating room. Li Tian couldn't help laughing. That's what he deserves. As soon as he saw the explosion injury, he knew it was caused by his own quirks. It's none of your business, Li Tian. Yi Yin still said angrily. Li Tian also shook his head slightly. This time Bakugo really did too much. If it's just a fight to gain the upper hand, a little sweat stain is enough, but as far as the touch of Li Tian's palm is pushed, Boom's tracksuit is definitely soaked by his sweat. This is completely disregarding your own life. Let's go to the operating room. Li Tian pulled the reluctant Yi Yin to the operating room. The door of Xiangying's operating room. From a distance, Li Tian saw that everyone in the class was waiting at the door of the operating room except for Ida, who took a phone call and left, as well as Aizawa Shota, All Might, and several teachers of Xiangying. Mr. Aizawa, how is Yi Ying him? Li Tian walked over to look at Aizawa Shota and asked. The young lady is performing an operation on Bakugo, but according to what I said in advance, this operation should not be dangerous. Aizawa Shota said lightly. Is there no danger? That's good. Li Tian nodded, also heaving a sigh of relief. Although it's not his fault, if something happens to Bakugo, then he will be in big trouble. Li Tian, Come with me. Aizawa Shota spoke, and then walked to the side. He knew that what should come will come. Li Tian followed behind Aizawa Shota with a blank face. The other students around looked at the departing Li Tian also with curiosity on their faces. Of course they knew what Aizawa Shota called Li Tian to do in the past. Including Green Valley, who is still worried about Bakugo. They all want to know. At the corner of the passage, Aizawa Shota stuck his footsteps and turned around to look at Li Tian seriously. What did Bakugo tell you about 657 on the field? Aizawa Shota asked seriously. I didn't say anything. Li Tian spread his hands helplessly. He just said he couldn't understand that I didn't go all out from the first match to the last group arena. It looks like a cloud. Hearing Li Tian's words, Aizawa Shota scratched his head helplessly. This childish guy. It's not my fault that I didn't go all out. With the equipment on my body, I can go all out and become the second in millions in minutes. The ability I fully mastered is not easy to use, so I have to grit my teeth. Li Tian continued helplessly, said. Of course Aizawa Shota knows who Million is, and he also understands what Li Tian means. In the Hero Sports Festival last year, Million's game attracted a lot of attention. Also, if I don't shoot with all my strength in the ring, is it possible that I have to throw my opponent off the ring without even a second to count as a full shot? What can I do? Li Tian also felt deeply when he said this. Speechless. After finally reliving for a while, didn't he just look at it a little bit? Didn't he just pretend to be aggressive? He provoked whoever he provoked. The young girl is operating on Bakugo, and he has no time to treat him, and now his palms still hurt a little. That childish ghost. Aizawa Shota also looked distressed. This sports festival seems to have a lot of scenery in Class A, but it is only. With him as the homeroom teacher, he knows what the troubles of Class A are like. Before that, Green Valley, which he was worried about, finally managed to control quirks, but the other Bakugo had problems in his heart again. And Hong, Aizawa Shota also learned about the complexity of Hong's family background and psychological problems. Even Li Tian, who looks pretty good, is not a simple student. I knew I would have passed the entrance test. Aizawa Shota rubbed his red eyes, thinking viciously in his heart. I see, let's go. Aizawa Shota turned to leave with a headache on his face. Just as he was about to leave, Li Tian suddenly remembered something, and then said softly, actually, teacher, you don't need to drag me so far, there are Jiro and Shoji over there. A little distance, they should have already repeated what we said to the people in the class. Quote. Aizawa Shota, Jiro Kyoka, Shoji Mezzo, Class A students and All Might. The police's arm is really big this time. They summon so many professional heroes in one go. Mount. Lady glanced at the professional heroes in the conference room with a look of surprise. Indeed, Endeavor, Best Jeanist, Hawks, Exquisite, Tyrannical Killer Whale are just half of the top 10 heroes, and there are a few who look a little older and unfamiliar. My name is heroes, but I received courtesy from the police. Millen Shinwei said in a deep voice, scanning around. What the hell is going on this time? The police have summoned this scale. Mount. Lady asked curiously. I don't know, I'm very tight-lipped. Millen Shinwei shook his head and said. Hey, isn't it, that's All Might. Whose All Might is also dispatched? Mount. Lady was taken aback suddenly, then quickly patted Jungle Kamui on the shoulder and whispered excitedly. All Might is here too. Different from MT. Lady's excitement. Millen Shinwei's heart sank the moment he saw All Might. What kind of villains organization actually summoned so many professional heroes and then called All Might? Could it be that there is an international villains organization sneaking into Neon? Professional heroes, everyone. On the side of the top heroes, a high-level police officer stood up and said in a deep voice, this operation is a top-secret mission, and the goal of the mission is to be completed in the team. Afterwards, the heroes who lead you will tell you that before this, all actions must be kept secret, and no contact with the outside world is allowed. As soon as these words came out, many unidentified professional heroes present looked serious, and looked at the top professional heroes with serious faces in disbelief. It's such a time, but you still have to hide the mission target. What kind of mission is this? The complexions of many heroes began to turn serious. Kurogiri. Tamura Shigaraki suddenly called out from somewhere in a messy room. Crack. The door opened, and Kurogiri, dressed neatly, walked into the room, saluting respectfully. Hey, tell me, is there any hope for this kid to be brought down in our camp? Si Gangmu didn't return, pointing to the TV in front of him and said. Him, Kurogiri murmured, thinking. He also watched the Xiangying Sports Festival in the afternoon, and he also paid attention to the kid that Shigaraki pointed at throughout the whole process, especially the final scene, which he paid more attention to. Maybe there is hope. Kurogiri nodded. If the outstanding freshmen in the first grade of Xiangying High School, the students taught by All Might, can be drawn into the camp of our villains, then it will have a great impact on Heroes Society and All Might. The influence of it, Shigaraki said longingly with a strange evil smile on his face. It is indeed possible, and it can be used as a trump card. After 2 or 3 attacks on Xiangying, the society's trust in Xiangying should be reduced to the lowest level. At that time, we will turn this student of Xiangying into villains' trump card. Played, Black Zero said. Ace, Si Gangmu stared at the figure on the screen. The picture shown on the TV is the last decisive battle of the first-year sports festival of Xiangying during the day, and the figure being stared at is Bakugo Katsuki, who is roaring with a ferocious face. By the way, have you found that hero's killer? Shizuoki suddenly asked. There is already news that the hero's killer was captured by a camera during his activities in Hosu City. After the specific location is sent, I will bring him here. Kurogiri said respectfully. Then try to be as fast as possible. I'm very curious about this hero's killer. The teacher has praised him several times. Shikurigi said lightly. Yes, according to the adults, the reason why the other party became a villains and continued to carry out high-intensity activities is very interesting, and the other party seems to be a relatively rare thought prisoner among villains. Heishui said. Thought prisoner. Shikurigi's eyes flashed the same light. You don't even realize that in this distorted society covered by hypocrisy and vanity, those who are called heroes let me wake you up. Knife. The man in the blood-red scarf squatted on it and looked down at an alley surrounded by police cars and muttered to himself. Clang. With a flash of the blade, the long knife swung out instantly, piercing into a purple-black vortex. Hero's killer Stain, I finally found you. Kurogiri's voice came. Is it villains? Hero's killer Stain frowned under the cloth mask, looking at Kurogiri and making a fighting stance. Don't do anything, we are not villains, we are of the same kind. Kurogiri said quickly, he did not come to fight. Same kind. Stain fixed his eyes and said strangely. Yes, someone from our organization wants to invite you. Are you interested in coming in to find out? Kurogiri said. Organization. Want to invite me? Interesting. Stain grinned and retracted the knife in his hand, but there was a faint glint in his eyes. Let's go. ... Oh, I didn't expect Stain to agree so happily. Kurogiri couldn't help being stunned for a moment before reacting, and then quickly said, then come in. Behind Kurogiri is a base of our organization. Quote. Looking at the twisted vortex in front of him, Stain hesitated for a moment, then walked in. Dilapidated shabby bar. A purple-black vortex appeared out of thin air, and then Stain, bent over and holding a knife, walked into the room. Are you the hero's killer? Stain, who had big hands on his face, turned his head and glanced at Stain, who walked in and said lightly. Are you the boss of the villains organization that wants to invite me? Stain asked back. Interesting, Nekorigi said nonchalantly. Kurogiri, serve him wine. Yes. Kurogiri nods back in his bartender attire. However, whoosh, a gleam of brilliance brushed Kurogiri's arm with lightning speed and fell into Stain's hand. Stain held the dagger in his hand, licked the blood from the blade bloodthirstily, and stared at the dead Ganmu in front of him with murderous intent. Whether it is heroes, the word has lost its original meaning and counterfeit goods are rampant everywhere. This society, or those criminals who abuse their power meaninglessly, are the targets I want to eliminate. Move. I can't move anymore. Kurogiri stood there tremblingly and said, the opponent has activated quirks. Hero's killer, do you want to declare war? Shigaraki looked at Stain coldly. Stain stared coldly at Shigenmu and said, at first, I thought that being the leader of a villains organization with rare quirks like teleportation would be a confident villains, but obviously, I wasted myself in your eyes. I didn't see the slightest belief or thought, so. Unfortunately, you are also the target of my elimination. Faith, thought, who would have that thing? Nekorigi looked at Stain and stood up, grinning sneeringly. However, unfortunately there is, the hero's killer is going to die here today, don't you think unlucky? Dead. Stain's eyes didn't waver at all. With all due respect, you don't have the ability to kill me yet. Stain's knife pierced through the shoulder of Shikuangmu and stuck it on the ground, looking at Shigongmu coldly. You are really strong enough. Nigaragi refrained from the pain, not paying any attention to Stain who was pressing on him. With his ability, it is destined that when the opponent can be caught by him, it is when he wins. However, don't wait for him to fight back, and don't wait for Stain to attack. Boom, boom, boom. Hello, this is a bar, right? Is anyone there? Shigongmu and Stain were a little stunned. Is it surprising that there are guests coming to a place like him? You have to know whether the last time a guest came in was 3 or 4 months ago. And Stain was even more confused. Isn't this the base of villains? Although it looks like a bar, it's not really a bar, is it? Is no one here? I clearly heard someone talking. Another voice sounded outside the door. Really, I finally found such a hidden bar. I thought there would be something, but there was no one there. What a disappointment. The sound of talking became farther and farther along with the sound of footsteps, and the voice of chatting became smaller and smaller, and finally disappeared in their ears. And at the moment when Nikugaraki and Stain instinctively breathed a sigh of relief. Preemptive strike. With the sound of shattering windows, several root-like things rushed in one after another, entangled Kurogiri, who was motionless in the room, and Shigeoki, who was pierced by a knife on the ground and was hard to dodge, tightly. Only Stain, at that moment, jumped back and dodged away. Stain yelled violently, slashing the sharp blade in his hand, smashing all the roots and sticks of the approaching trees to pieces. You can escape my lacquer tree lock, wait, you are. Jungle Kamui, who rushed in from the window, looked at Stain in surprise, blood-red scarf, knives all over the body, you are Hero's killer Stain. Hero's killer Stain. How could he be here? Another voice sounded from inside the bar. Akashute appeared inside the bar counter at some point, and both Kurogiri and Shikuragi, who were locked by the Jungle Kamui, have both passed out. This guy's quirks are quite tricky, let's go into a coma for a while, talk later. Did they restrain the two of them before, so that they didn't have time to fight back? Stain's eyes turned cold, and a solemn expression appeared on his face as he watched the scene in front of him. Hero's killer Stain, let's capture it without a fight. This place is already surrounded. Ijixiote said lightly, and at the same time walked out of the bar to the door and opened the door. A dozen heavily armed policemen rushed in with hot weapons. Police. Stain was stunned for a moment, and then looked at the two of them who had fainted, Shikuragi and Kurogiri, in disbelief. What evil did this palm-sized small villains organization, Nuo Jiao, do, that the police and top professional heroes would join forces to search for it? It's amazing. The police would join hands with professional heroes to attack a small organization like the League of Villains. Suddenly, a man's voice came from the TV in the room. Milin Shenwei shouted violently. Oh, there are people attacking from my side too. Let you attack a small league of villains with this speed and this lineup, didn't you discover my existence? The voice on the TV answered irrelevantly. Is there someone behind this organization? Stain narrowed his eyes, not surprised, just like he thought before, how could Niugaragi not look like he could subdue the teleporter quirks Kurogiri? Could it be that you are? Ijishu was shocked. Ijishu shouted instantly, Dense Lin Shenwei, take those two prisoners and leave quickly, don't get caught. Yes, senior, Milin Shenwei quickly responded, and then he jumped out of the window with the two of them. It's really decisive. All for one praised on the other side, and at the same time stopped the intention of teleporting the two. However, you guys are really bold. Knowing that I exist, you actually only sent these people. Is it because I was seriously injured that I couldn't be cured, so you ignored me? Only these people were sent. Ijishote's mind turned quickly, and then he came to a conclusion that he didn't want to draw. Oops, All Might went to the wrong place. After the Hero Sports Festival ended, Aizawa Shota announced the 2-day holiday at the class meeting, and informed them that Aizawa Shota would accept invitations from professional heroes across the country during these 2 days to prepare for the workplace experience. As for Bakugo, because the operation was successful, and with quirks, the recovery girl, there will be no serious problems after 2 days of recuperation, so the school also notified Bakugo's parents to come and pick up Bakugo. And of course Li Tian also met Bakugo's parents. Huh, how do you say it? Surprisingly reasonable. She didn't shake Li Tian's face or anything like that. Instead, she suppressed Bakugo and started preaching. Seeing how aggressive she was, if Bakugo hadn't just had an operation, she would even have suppressed Bakugo to apologize to Li Tian. Thinking of the appearance of Bakugo's mother, Li Tian couldn't help but want to smile. Although Bakugo's slightly distorted self-esteem is due to the flattery he grew up in his own donkey temper, the irascibility is probably inherited from Bakugo's mother. Walking in Kanagawa, Li Tian couldn't help laughing at the thought of carrying 2 shopping bags. In the shopping bag are the new clothes that Li Tian bought in the shopping mall just now, which he found on the internet. The clothes sold in this store are said to be made of a special material made by Quirks, super wear resistant. To match it with the shoes of the same material as the suit that Li Tian asked the Xiangying school to get after the USJ incident last time, Li Tian can still run in that undressed state. Of course, Li Tian's real purpose was to find the Nomu factory, and he just bought 2 clothes along the way as an excuse to appear in the Kano area of Kanagawa. He just remembered that the Nomu factory and All for One were hidden in a relatively remote factory in the Kano area of Kanagawa Prefecture. As for the specific location, he has never seen the signal tracker since USJ, so how could he know? In addition, Yaoyorozu Wan was strictly prohibited from making another signal tracker, and Li Tian had no way to ask for it, so he could only wait here and wait for 957. Really, I originally planned to follow my aunt to keep up, but after the Heroic Sports Festival ended, my aunt disappeared. Li Tian scratched his head. Anyway, his original purpose was to ensure that his aunt would not have any accidents. Now, by the way, it's so chaotic over there, are there other villains? Li Tian was speechless looking at the faint voices coming from the city center in the distance. The city center is attacked, and then All Might and All for One will fight here again later. The police station here in Shenye is quite busy tonight. Li Tian scratched his head and muttered to himself, but he didn't have the idea of going to join in the fun. After all, this is a bustling city, and I am afraid that a large number of professional heroes and the police rushed to him immediately after the accident. He is a student who does not even have a temporary license. It's better to concentrate on doing his own thing. By the way, I can find the opposite police car. Li Tian suddenly had an idea. Since this time it is a joint operation with the police, there will inevitably be police personnel dispatched, and villains appearing in the direction of the city center. Then the police cars are police heroes in the opposite direction, maybe this time crusade against the people in the team. If it is a bit difficult to find the villain's stronghold, it will be easier to find the policemen and heroes who are preparing to act. I just hope that my aunt won't be on another team, Isn't it better for my aunt to be on another team? With All for One on this side, it is impossible for the other side to crush the existence of villains. Li Tian suddenly thought of this a little, thoughtfully. But at this moment, the corner of Li Tian's eyes suddenly glanced at a figure on a speeding black car on the street. That's. Li Tian looked at the police car going away on the street, with a smile on his face, although it was just a glimpse, but the police car sitting. It's Best Jeanist, that's right, I found it. A BIFC smile appeared in the corner of Li Tian's eyes, and he walked towards the side alley with his hands and feet moving. Although the cameras on the street couldn't capture his speed, he still watched out for crowd witnesses. Best Jeanist, now we can start talking about the objectives of this mission. A female voice comes from Best Jeanist's headset in the police car. If Li Tian heard it, he would probably be able to recognize it right away. This voice was none other than his family's aunt, Mt. Lady. The target of this mission is a small organization called Enemy United. Best Jeanist said simply. League of Villains. Isn't that the small villains organization that attacked Xiangying a month ago and was beaten back in a few minutes? Mount. Lady asked in surprise. Because her little nephew was the first participant in that incident, afterward Xiangying specially instructed her as the parent, so she paid special attention to it and remembered the villains organization that caused trouble. You know, Best Jeanist was slightly surprised. The villains group attacked Xiangying in the heroes' first grade class. My nephew is in that class, and he is the number 1 in the first grade of Xiangying today. Mount. Lady explained proudly. It's that student. Best Jeanist also remembered. However, compared to the first place, Chaobang Niucho is more concerned about which other person in the final. Mr. Best Jeanist, is it really necessary for such a small organization to organize a troop crusade of this scale? And it needs to be so carefully divided into several lanes to pass slowly. Another professional heroes of Best Jeanist asked in surprise from the headset. Indeed, League of Villains is a villains organization that has Yaoyorozu in neon. If it is not for the attack on the hero, which involves All Might and the name of the hero who has never been invaded, that kind of villains organization won't even appear on TV, but Best Jeanist said with a serious face. A top-notch heroes should not judge a villains based on such simple factors. According to the information and evidence from the police, behind this tiny villains organization lies an extremely terrifying the villains. Behind the League of Villains. Is there an extremely terrifying villains? Listening to the voice coming from the earphones, all the professional heroes couldn't help but be amazed, which can make Best Jeanist say that it is extremely terrifying. Everyone's hearts were also a little heavy. So this time, All Might will be involved. That's great, it's the first time for me to carry out a mission with All Might, but it's a pity that I didn't get assigned to All Might's team. Mount, Lady said with a regretful face. Quote. The corner of Best Jeanist's mouth twitched. It's really wrong you to be on the same team as him. All Might's team will most likely face the most terrifying villains, and is also the most dangerous, so the assignments are top professional heroes and experienced professional heroes. Guys, rookies, do you still want to go to that team? Best Jeanist said. Forget it, it's good to be here. Mount, Lady said with a smile. Okay, let's stop joking around here, we'll be there soon. Best Jeanist said with a serious face. The base we're going to attack next is the opponent's factory for transforming people, and there are quite a few transforming people in it. People. Mount, Lady, wait for you to start the first strike, be sure to suppress the villains in terms of momentum. The others and I will take the opportunity to destroy all the machines and capture those who have been modified. Best Jeanist said in a deep voice, ordering. Then there are rescue teams and evacuation teams. When MT. Lady launches an attack, no matter what happens, the surrounding people must be evacuated as soon as possible. All the surrounding 1 kilometer needs emergency evacuation, and the surrounding 5 kilometers will be evacuated according to the situation. Quote. Yes, professional heroes scattered throughout the Kano area or in ordinary private cars or police ambulances responded in unison. This works, it's perfect for mouth. In the dim room, the computer screen flickered, and the faint light slightly illuminated the room like a laboratory factory. In the darkness, a figure was looking at the screen on the computer screen. Controllable super speed. If it is paired with hanging Honkai, it should be an interesting combination. All for One, with an industrial mask on his face, rested his chin and quietly looked at the screen on the computer screen. What was shown on the screen was the final match of the Xiangying Sports Festival. God knows what weird quirks he uses to keep his eyes off the computer. Think about it, that person who has such useless quirks is really unlucky. He obviously has all such useless quirks, but he will be topped by a boss-level character. It's decided, let this quirks be included in the quirks that are ready to hang. All for One said with a light smile. If this is the case, it needs a good plan. This kid's quirks don't seem to be easy to catch. Suddenly, a voice came from another computer beside him. So doctor, you only need to do a good job in my treatment, and you should leave it to me and others to calculate this kind of thing. All for One chuckled. In this world, although there are strong and weak quirks, they are only used by people. Weak quirks will become stronger because of strong people, and strong quirks will also become weak because of weak people. But as long as there are enough suitable quirks, even something like Nomu can become stronger. The doctor said with a smile. Nomu. All for One shook his head. That kind of thing can only be said to be a relatively easy to use weapon, but it can help a little before the hanging grows up. That was before my latest Nomu research results, but it is about to evolve Nomu from a weapon to a villain's. The doctor suddenly became excited. This body of mine is almost unable to hold on anymore. All for One said lightly. No way. The doctor's excited voice dimmed immediately, and he returned to calm. If you can get the super regenerative quirks 5 years earlier, your body can fully recover, but now. I know, that's why I devoted myself to cultivating hangs after that. After all, which All Might's fist is, it's not so easy to feel. All Forne said lightly. Originally found the grandson of the previous one for all Shimura Nana. Shimura turned Arg, and turned him into villains, Tamura Shigaraki, just to disgust All Might at that time, but after that, he didn't have time to speak at all in that battle, was knocked down by All Might. Afterwards, he changed Tamura Shigaraki's training plan accordingly. I'm not interested in those things, Shikuragi, if he is really capable, I will assist him like I assist you, but if I don't have the ability. The doctor hadn't finished speaking. Then let him die, All for One said flatly. That's good. The doctor smiled and hung up the call. Hang, don't let me down. In the factory room, All for One stood up and walked over to a strange instrument beside it. It was a place full of a jar of unknown dark green liquid. All for One walked over and soaked in it directly. The recuperation warehouse. This is a potion specially formulated to ease his physical injuries and keep him from deteriorating. Suddenly, an alarm sounded from the computer in front of him. Is this? What happened to hanging? All for One stood up from the jar and looked at the computer strangely. However, at this moment, boom, suddenly there was a violent sound from outside the room, and the ground shook. All for One was taken aback, and looked outside in surprise. Assault. Ah, villains attack. There are villains, everyone run. In the bustling downtown area, panicked shouts suddenly came from a building. At the same time, with a series of loud noises, countless people rushed out of the building. And a considerable number of professional heroes also rushed over from the side, rushing into the building and carrying a large number of people to flee quickly. Flames, smoke, and explosions kept coming from the building, and cries and scolding were everywhere. A large number of police quickly stepped forward to disperse the crowd and maintain order. In front of the building, several police cars stopped abruptly. A middle-aged police chief and Endeavor got out of the car, and the middle-aged police chief shouted at the building with a loudspeaker. Crazy Bomber, you have been surrounded by professional heroes and the police, come out and surrender as soon as possible. And as soon as the name of Violent Bomber appeared, the crowd who had stopped to watch the excitement showed panic all of a sudden, and hurriedly turned their heads and ran away. The area around the building that was visible to the naked eye quickly became empty. Except for the police and heroes, there were almost no ordinary people left. Violent Bomber, Villains, Quirks Bomb, is a fanatical building demolition maniac that can turn objects it touches into powerful bombs. It has appeared 4 times so far, and each time it will be notified in advance to place a time bomb, to give people time to escape before detonating, so the casualties are not too many each time, but it caused great social panic and a large number of squares, shopping malls, skyscrapers were blown up, affecting a large number of other buildings around, and the economic loss was very serious. And when the neighborhood has been almost cleaned up, in the corner of one side of the building, a bright black RV parked here quietly without moving. In a black car. Is this the place? All Might sat in a car staring at another building next to the blasted building and said in a deep voice. Well, according to the tracking of the locator, compared with the other 2 bases, the number of times the opponent comes here is the least. It will only come once every 7 or 8 days or even 10 days. At that time, it was more than 10 days before we first came. This is the first time I found out that the other party is here. Tsukauchi Masao said seriously. And the head of the household is a doctor who was suspected of conducting illegal quirks research in the hospital and was dismissed from his home for several years. According to the investigation, there are a total of 10 houses on the 16th floor to the 23rd floor, 7 floors. It is very likely that they were all linked together and turned into laboratories. Combined with other evidences investigated this month, it is most likely that All for One is hiding here to heal and recuperate. Masao Tsukachi said seriously. All for One. Gran Torino said in a deep voice. Jundian, are you sure this time? Of course. All Might clenched his fist, his blue pupils filled with determination. All for One, a dangerous villains, must not be left to the next generation. Is that so? Gran Torino looked at All Might seriously. Since this is the case, Jundian, don't make the mistake you made 6 years ago again. Don't listen to anything All for One says, don't think about anything All for One said, you just need to be right. Just let him shake his fist. I know. All Might nodded solemnly. The evacuation of the surrounding buildings has been completed, and we can start to prepare for the attack. Sukichi Jungjung heard a message from his earphone, and said hastily. Okay. All Might looked up at the building in front of him, grinned and showed his big white teeth, and got out of the car. That's right, the reason why All Might and others quietly watched the attack on the villains aside in this car. That's because the villains' attack there was originally arranged by them, and the crazy bomber was secretly arrested by them long ago. Now there are only some fake bombs with smoke, light and loud sound. And a group of heroes and the police acted together. After all, unlike those two sparsely populated factory areas and less prosperous streets, this place is close to the city center, so this is the only way to evacuate a large number of people. Behind All Might, Endeavor, Hawks, Gran Torino, and a group of professional heroes who are not young or even semi-retired at a similar age to Gran Torino. Let's go. In a dim room, a short doctor stood on the operating table and performed various operations on a Nomu. It's really noisy outside. The villains who doesn't even dare to kill but just blows up the house is caught by heroes as soon as possible, and he is so good at running away, disturbing my operation. With a voice he complained twice while cutting Nomu's body with a scalpel. It's almost finished. Nomu who can have wisdom. The doctor looked at Nomu who was covered with incisions on the operating table with enthusiasm. As long as this Nomu is completed, with the power of All for One, you can easily create a powerful army of villains who are not afraid of death. At that time, there will definitely be more and more people who will become the materials for my quirks research. I'll definitely figure out what quirks are. The doctor whispered frantically. The scalpel in his hand was cutting and piecing together parts of Nomu's head. Doctor, Quirk's scalpel, any wound made by the condensed scalpel will not affect the body, will not bleed, even if the heart is split open, the head will not die, only need to gently wipe the wound together for a second, it can restore the wound to its original state. Limited to organisms excluding plants. Come on. With an order. The heroes, from the 16th floor to the 23rd floor, a total of 10 households, kicked the door and broke in. Don't move. In front of the operating table, the doctor froze for a moment. Raise your hands, turn around, don't speak, don't make unnecessary movements. A cold voice sounded. The doctor slowly raised his hands with an ugly expression and turned around, not daring to move. Behind him, a hero's with a pistol aimed at his head. He's a ghost. The doctor quickly recognized the heroes aiming at him with a pistol in front of him. Ghosts, stealth class heroes. Quirks. Ghosts can transform into ghosts, can carry things that do not exceed their own strength and turn them into ghosts together, such as clothes and pistols. After transformation, they have flight through walls, physical attack immunity, etc. It has the same ability as a ghost, but after being transformed into a ghost, it will be hit by energy attacks such as flames, lightning, and lasers. It's over. The doctor looked at the ghost in front of him with an ugly face. As far as he knew, the ghost didn't have the ability to attack directly because of its own quirks, and the tasks it performed were not very bright and dangerous. So there are very few heroes who will make a decisive move against villains. He doesn't have much fighting ability himself, and the Nomu in this room has just been dismantled by him, and it hasn't been assembled yet. Before he could finish speaking, a bullet would penetrate his head decisively. I can only wait for All for One to save me. The doctor instantly gave up his resistance and wanted to wait for rescue. You said no. Sukichi Jungji's face instantly became ugly. Yes, that Yi and 16 Nomu were captured in the 10 rooms, but no other villains were found. A loud report came from the earphone. And the complexions of the heroes in each room of the building also turned ugly instantly. Wrong guess. All Might's face was extremely ugly, and such thoughts appeared in their minds instantly. Oops, in order to prevent All for One from discovering the attack, the three of us launched the attack at the same time. If All for One is not on our side, then hastily took out the unlimited battery and prepared to contact the other two places. Nomu Factory. The villains is in Nomu Factory. Jixiat's voice came from the wireless in an instant. Oops, Masayoshi Sukichi's expression changed instantly. And All Might, who was waiting for the battle with All for One, rushed out in an instant, leaping out from the window on the 16th floor. All Might had already remembered the 3 action locations this time, so he naturally knew which direction to go. Ask for flowers. All Might shouted loudly at the wireless phone in his hand. Best Genist, Hold on, I'll be there in 2 minutes. Time went back to a few minutes ago. Boom. Following the fall of Mt. Lady's foot, the ground shook and the mountains shook, and violent shock waves scattered away. The dilapidated factory turned into ruins directly. At the moment when the shock wave flew away, hundreds, no, thousands of thin fibers that were invisible to the naked eye quickly pierced into the messy factory, tightly binding several Nomu who were awakened by the loud noise. The huge palm of Mt. Lady, who turned tens of meters in size, also went deep into the ruins, and quickly grabbed 3 or 4 Nomu that escaped the best genist fiber blockade. In addition, several professional heroes around also quickly stepped forward and attacked the remaining Nomu. With the assistance of number 4 best genist, within a few minutes, the Nomu of the entire factory was captured and suppressed. Mobile team, prepare the mobile cage immediately. Maybe there will be. Best genist said to the heavily armed police on the side. Yes, really, can this kind of thing really be considered a living person? Mount. Lady pinched the doll-like Nomu in her hand with a look of disgust. Mr. Best genist, it's really good that we are so relaxed here. Do you need to go to Mr. All Might to help? Doesn't it mean that the villains over there are very troublesome? Point 0. Separately consider the difficulty and importance of the work, rookie. Best genist glanced at Mt. Lady, and said coldly, facing the villains who sent quirks, the villains on our side is their support. If there is support over there, these guys may escape if they relax for a moment. But, it's too easy. Mount. Lady pouted, and threw the Nomu she was holding into the mobile cage pushed by the police mobile team. Such a big action, I thought it would be very difficult, but it ended in such a hasty way. How can I brag at the press conference when I go back? How can I get more money based on the merits of the action? Mount. Lady complained softly. If you want money, it's better to go to the press conference and brag. Best genist glanced at Mt. Lady's mouth twitching. Are the current heroes so focused on fame, wealth and money? A voice suddenly rang out. But if I don't earn money, my family will almost have no money for food. Mount. Lady complained instinctively. No. Best genist reacted instantly, turned around and looked deep into the ruins of the factory, and quickly reminded, be alert, there are villains. Is there villains? Heroes of other professions also responded quickly, and instantly. Vigilance mentioned the highest. Do you earn money to eat? I haven't heard such a simple answer for many years. The voice sounded again, full of nostalgia. I remember the first time I used. When I used quirks, it was also to make money, to eat for my brother and me. I really miss it. Facing the footsteps and words of All for One in the darkness, Best genist's eyes were fixed, and the sleeves of his arms instantly disintegrated into thousands of slender lines, instantly disintegrating the darkness. The All for One in is wrapped up tightly. However, shoot directly without any hesitation, judgment, experience, worthy of the number 4 heroes. In the dark, All for One faced the group that tied him up. The sturdy and slender fibers opened their mouths and praised. Best genist's face became serious again. He was bound firmly by him but still so indifferent. If he is not a fool, then he really has confidence. But could the villains look like that? The tightly bound All for One arm muscles twitched suddenly and swelled suddenly. A chilling pressure suddenly appeared in everyone's heart. Boom boom boom. Terrible power erupted. Shock waves visible to the naked eye pierced the sky. The ground shook and billowed with smoke and dust, and half of the half-abandoned factory suddenly disappeared, directly in half. The air was turned into powder 6 by a huge force. Boom boom boom. A terrifying power erupted. Shock waves visible to the naked eye pierced the sky. The ground shook and billowed with smoke and dust, and more than half of the half-abandoned factory suddenly disappeared, and was directly turned into powder by the huge force in midair. However, floating in midair, All for One looked at the direction he bombarded just now with some surprise, stretched out his right hand and flapped it slightly in front of him. A gust of wind howled, and the billowing smoke and powder were blown away, revealing an open space. As expected, I was not mistaken. All for One said softly, and slowly turned in one direction in midair, looked at the people standing in another place, and a gleam flashed in his eyes. At that moment, it was indeed a golden light flashed past. Is this? Are we all right? Even Best genist was a little dazed at this moment. He had clearly sensed the terrible pressure and the danger of death just now, and was about to throw away all the people around him. But what is the situation? Hey, I'm so scared, I almost missed it. Li Tian was wearing a pair of denim pants, standing in place moving his hands and feet with a look of joy on his face. It's not that, 730, changed his clothes to waste time, or ran a little slower, it's just. Auntie, it's time for you to lose weight. Li Tian looked at the somewhat dazed MT. That's right, the reason why Li Tian didn't catch up was because Yu Shanyu was still in a gigantic state just now, that kind of titan with a height of tens of meters, how could Li Tian's small body be able to drag it? You don't know if it was because of the pressure from All for One and the death threat at that moment, or if it was for some reason that Quirks was cancelled. Boy, who are you asking to lose weight? After all, it was a woman. When Li Tian mentioned the weight problem, she subconsciously started to talk back to Li Tian. Wait a minute, why are you here, kid? Yu Shanyu, who reacted with a look of astonishment, pointed at Li Tian with a look of shock. I was shopping nearby, and from a distance I saw you seem to be on a mission here, so I wanted to come over to say hello, but it's really lucky. Li Tian said with a look of rejoicing. Just think of a good reason and say it without fear that no one will believe it. Yu Shanyu looked at the two big shopping bags in Li Tian's hand and couldn't help but not believe it. You are Li Tian. Best Jeanist looked at Li Tian in front of him and recognized him. After all, he just watched Xiangying's sports festival in the afternoon, so he wouldn't forget the first-year champion in the evening. It's me. However, now is not a good time to get to know each other. Li Tian grinned, turned around and looked at All for One floating in midair. Speaking of which, the villains you are facing is really terrifying. If the villains are like this, then the Neon Heroes is really lucky to be active until now. Li Tian half said jokingly. It's really an honor to be praised by classmate Li Tian. All for One said with a chuckle in midair, and at the same time, his figure quickly descended and landed on the ground level with Li Tian again. You know me. Li Tian was really a little surprised. Is the Heroic Sports Festival so awesome? He just won a first-year championship, but even this kind of boss-level character can say his name. At the Hero Sports Festival, I will never forget Li Tian's performance. All for One said. That's really unfortunate. I just participated in a sports festival and was targeted by villains of your level. Li Tian was really helpless. If you want to become a hero, you have to be targeted by the villains. To be targeted by me can only show that Li Tian, you are a good candidate for heroes. All for One said with a light smile. If you just listen to the tone of voice and demeanor, and don't listen to what All for One says, you can't know the true face of All for One. Then Li Tian probably feels that this AI for One is an amiable big brother. Then I should also thank you for your consideration. Li Tian spread his hands and shrugged. Haha, classmate Li Tian is joking. All for One suddenly laughed. At this time, Li Tian, who was talking and laughing with All for One, the professional heroes who was rescued by Li Tian, and the police mobile team were already stunned. Especially looking at the terrifying trace on the side of All for One, their bodies could still recall the feeling of dying, which made them have such doubts in their hearts. Did he really go through that scene like we did? Otherwise, how could he still be able to chat and laugh happily with that kind of villains? Okay, classmate Li Tian, let's stop chatting here. Don't use the trick of delaying time, let's start directly. As a hero's no, I want to be a hero's boy. Since you are standing in front of my villains, then you must be trying to stop me. Alpharone's voice was still calm. TCH, sure enough the villains are old and cunning things. Li Tian pouted. Mr. Best Jeanist, when will the support arrive? Don't say we are the only ones facing this guy, no. Just a few of you. Support. Best Jeanist smiled wryly in his heart. According to the distance between the team and the 3 attack locations at that time, it was discussed when considering the worst outcome. If the villains All for One appeared in the League of Villains bar, then All Might could arrive in about 1 minute and 30 seconds, but it would take about 2 minutes for him to feel it. Now All Might should have discovered that the villains is not there. Even if All Might rushed over regardless of where, it would take at least 2 minutes at least. And 2 minutes, the shock wave created by the expansion of the opponent's muscles almost killed all of their villains in seconds, and it was unattainable to last for half a minute. After a lot of thinking, Best Jeanist finished thinking about all the above in an instant, and said calmly, 2 minutes. Just after finishing speaking, All Might's voice came from Best Jeanist's waist. Best Jeanist, hold on, I'll be there in 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Li Tian was taken aback. What's going on? Didn't All Might go to the bar and get there in 30 seconds? I see, All Might also participated in this operation. I said why would they suddenly attack me? All for One laughed knowingly. 2 minutes, not on the hanging side. Well, at All Might's speed, 2 minutes is about 20 kilometers. That direction is the doctor's house. I really underestimated you and the police's investigative ability. Even the doctor was searched. All for One couldn't help but laughed and shook his head, applauding. Doctor, who is it? Li Tian was stunned. How could there be another doctor? Hidden information uncovered by the police. This is superfluous. Absolutely superfluous. This kind of confident look. Best Jeanist gritted his teeth and looked at All for One, his eyes full of determination. Student Li Tian, bring MT. Lady and other professional heroes and the police to run. I will try my best to hold him back. Best Jeanist took 2 steps forward and stood in front of everyone and said in a deep voice. Desperately holding me back. It's really interesting. All for One laughed, and the laughter was full of disdain. Ha, take them all away. Li Tian looked at his aunt, the 7 professional heroes and the densely packed 20 or 30 heavily armed policemen around him couldn't help but have a black thread on his head. 17 Hey, what do you think of me? What is the ability? I just run fast, and it will take at least 10 seconds to take all these people to a safe place. Are you sure you can hold it? Give it a try. All Might still has about 1 minute and 45 seconds to arrive. I also want to try to see if I can buy you time to leave. Best Jeanist stared at All for One without blinking. Dare to blink, the fibers of his denim jacket have been decomposed. Come on. After I sent people away, I protected so many people and held this monster for more than a minute. You thought it was All Might. Although Li Tian's words were harsh, Best Jeanist was not annoyed at all. After all, it is indeed difficult for him to persist for such a long time, and his strength is indeed far inferior to All Might. Li Tian took 2 steps forward and stood side by side with Best Jeanist, looked at All for One and said in a deep voice, give me authorization. In the name of Professional Heroes 2.2, I can use quirks to fight. How can? Without waiting for Best Jeanist to ask, Li Tian quickly continued, if I help you here, at least I can help you when you can't escape, so that you can last a few more rounds, and it's not you I won't fight without authorization. After all, I don't want to leave a black history of not fighting or fleeing and then be sprayed to death by keyboard warriors on the internet. Also, the other party is obviously not going to let us continue the chat to delay the time. The other party is already a good person in the first 20 seconds. All for One over there shrugged his shoulders with a smile. Indeed, he was not going to continue the chat. There was a struggle on Best Jeanist's face, but he is not an indecisive person. When such a moment of hesitation may lead to a completely different result, the judgment of the top heroes made him make a choice. In the name of the Professional Heroes Best Jeanist, I allow Li Tian to use quirks to participate in this battle. The moment the voice fell, Li Tian grinned, stepped forward, and instantly entered the Speed Force state. The whole world stood still for an instant. The battle began. Chapter 51. First of all, Li Tian glanced at All for One who was about to raise his hand to aim at them, and then ran towards his aunt beside him with all his strength. Li Tian stopped the Speed Force instantly and then re-entered the Speed Force after letting go. After 8 times in a row, Li Tian threw out his aunt and the other 7 professional heroes before throwing out the 22 heavily armed policemen who were slightly inferior to Rikido. A series of actions. Under the speed boost mode, it took Li Tian less than 0.2 seconds to throw a total of 30 people out, and only then did Li Tian quickly pick up Best Jeanist and move to the side, get out of the way and dodge the attack launched by All for One. Best Jeanist only felt a flash in front of his eyes, and appeared in another location, and then a roar sounded in his ears, but the other companions beside him had disappeared. I was just surprised for a moment. Best Jeanist came down again. Even without Li Tian's help, he could actually avoid Alpharon's attack. It's just that if he had to take care of other people, he might be wiped out a little slower. It's really fast. All for One side again. At that moment just now, he could only rely on his super eyesight to catch the very blurred afterimages of Li Tian canceling the Speed Force when he let go. As for stopping, his body can't react at all. But, I didn't intend to take his life. Alpharon's eyes flashed. Looking at Li Tian, his heart was full of covetousness, his right hand swelled slightly, and a shock wave directly blasted over. Best Jeanist has been watching All for One carefully and vigilantly at the moment of attack, and directly dodges by using the fibers arranged in advance. As for Li Tian, it was even more straightforward. That kind of slow attack in his opinion could not threaten him at all. The moment he dodged away, Best Jeanist noticed that only he, Li Tian and All for One were left here, and the others had disappeared. "Classmate Li Tian, where are the others?" Chao Niu Wang shouted loudly. "Throw it all out," Li Tian also said flatly. "Throw it out." Before Best Jeanist had time to say anything, Alpharon's attack came again, that kind of punching style that was comparable to All Might. No one was willing to fight hard, and the whole person was quickly pulled away. Without using all my strength, the flying speed is less than 1 Mach. It should slow down after flying 1 or 2 kilometers. 8 professional heroes should be able to protect 22 policemen to land safely. Li Tian dodged and dodged, said it quickly, and then instantly entered the Speed Force mode. In the next moment, he appeared directly behind All for One, and Ji roared out with a straight right fist at full speed. However, All for One just staggered forward and completely withstood Li Tian's supersonic straight punch. Even if Li Tian's fist wasn't too sudden and it was behind him, All for One didn't even move. "You can directly hold it hard." Shock reversal. All for One instinctively launched quirks at the moment of staggering, and the tyrannical fist power mixed with the reaction force of Li Tian's fist and counter-shocked out, and Li Tian roared in the opposite direction. Not good. The moment his arm just received the impact force, Li Tian reacted, and his arm couldn't bear the shock force. Whoosh! Li Tian's whole body entered the Speed Force mode, and he retreated crazily, dodging quickly. As soon as Li Tian disappeared, he saw a punch pass through the position where Li Tian disappeared instantly, blasting into the ruins in the distance and causing a big explosion. Call! Li Tian appeared not far away in an instant, holding his arms and gritted his teeth while looking at All for One bound up by Best Jeanist with countless slender fibers, but his eyes were full of joy. If it wasn't because of his resilience, he still couldn't quickly recover from the injury after punching at full speed, so when he punched, he didn't swing at full speed, otherwise. At that moment, he couldn't escape. "Student Li Tian, if you can't fight, leave first." On the side, Best Jeanist looked at Li Tian's broken arm and shouted. "It's too early for this little injury." Li Tian supported his broken arm, aiming at the bone, and under the effect of the Speed Force physique, the injury was recovering at a speed visible to the naked eye. Boom! All for One just swelled his muscles, and his body was broken by countless dense fibers wrapped in circles, and the terrifying shock waves were constantly shot out by him. With a vague smile on his face, "Li Student Tian, you are still not cruel enough. If you had just stabbed at the back of my head with a dagger in your hand, then this battle might have ended." The voice of All for One roared along with the shock waves that almost enveloped the audience. "Don't be kidding me." Li Tian ran quickly while supporting his broken arm, which was recovering quickly, dodging one after another. "If I stab you with a dagger, I'm afraid it won't be the back of your head that will be broken first, but the back of your head. It's a dagger." The same is true for Best Jeanist on the other side. Those shock waves All for One mainly attacked Li Tian. He just dodged the aftermath, and still didn't need Li Tian's help. The surrounding area was originally a factory area, and not many people would be here at night, and they were sent to asylum early before the operation, and those professional heroes and the police also exited this area early, so the surrounding area was not crowded. There is no public presence. No matter whether it is Li Tian or Best Jeanist, they dodge without any scruples. Haha, who knows about this? All for One smiled, and when he kept launching attacks, he began to calculate in his heart, and then shook his head involuntarily. Many of his current quirks are basically chosen to deal with powerful players like All Might. Although his reflexes can handle All Might's speed, if he wants to deal with Li Tian's terrifying speed, he can't. There is no such thing as a great solution. Can you still recover from the injury? What an excellent quirks. All for One looked at Li Tian's arm that was about to recover and suddenly sighed with emotion. Excellent quirks. Li Tian's complexion changed slightly, and he couldn't help looking at All for One with vigilance. He knows what a quirks called All for One is, and this is the ability to win quirks. The ability to capture quirks. Then I'm worried. Li Tian was stunned. His ability is not quirks, but the speed force that was struck by lightning. On the contrary, if All for One wants to take my quirks, that means he won't kill me. Li Tian moved his recovering right hand and squinted his eyes. Then give it a try. Li Tian stared at All for One. The whole person quickly started to run, turned into a golden lightning, and appeared in front of All for One. The golden lightning frantically circled All for One. Under Li Tian's deliberate indulgence, the power of the speed force let go of all of them. The wind blows, the sand, gravel and dust on the ground whizzes up, the smoke and dust cover the surrounding vision, and only a golden lightning arc can be seen dimly, forming a circle around All for One. Throw lightning. Li Tian, who was circling around All for One, dragged the accumulated lightning in his hand, and threw it towards All for One suddenly. The moment the lightning was shot, it instantly turned into a golden thunder spear, and the lightning was as solid as its substance. Quick, it's like a real thunder. The moment of shooting is the moment of hitting. All for One just had a flash of golden light in front of his eyes, and the golden thunder spear had already hit his chest, which completely exceeded his reaction speed, and he couldn't dodge at all. Even launch quirks. With a loud noise, All for One, who endured Li Tian's supersonic punch and only staggered a step, flew backwards, slid heavily on the ground and fell into the ruins. So strong. Li Tian stopped in his tracks, and stared at All for One flying upside down, with a look of surprise in his eyes. Throwing speed force, this is the first time he has used it on a human body since he learned it. Before, he either threw it at the sea or at the boulder, although the power that erupted was huge. But it's not exaggerated like this. What Li Tian doesn't know is that throwing lightning is not thunder and lightning, but the speed force, a mysterious force that surpasses the four basic forces of the universe, and its power is not judged by the scale of the damage it causes, but from the destruction of nature. Ahem. All for One coughed from the ruins, and the whole person flew up into the air, covering the place where he was hit. The neat suit on his body was already torn, and the place where he was hit on his chest was charred black from between his fingers, and the blood at the corner of his mouth was wiped off by him. I underestimated you. All for One said to Li Tian in a deep voice. There was finally a touch of caution in the voice, and it was calm before. In fact, although Li Tian's lightning throw was unrivaled in speed and extremely powerful, it was not unbearable for All for One. But what he never imagined was that Li Tian's attack could trigger the already stable injury in his body. Just took one hit, and his current injury has already started to deteriorate. If he was hit 4 or 5 times once, without even using his hands, his body will collapse by itself. This can't be done. This body can't collapse now. When All for One looked at Li Tian, a murderous intent finally appeared in his heart. The attack is effective. Student Li Tian, continue to use the lightning attack just now. Beside, Best Jeanist hastily shouted. No, he might not give me this chance. Li Tian looked at All for One in the sky with a wry smile on his face. If you want to throw the speed force, you must first run in a circle. While running fast, you must collect enough speed force before you can throw it. At Li Tian's current speed, it will take at least 3 seconds to collect enough speed force. Best Jeanist looked up and saw that All for One was walking in the sky, and the frightening pressure came from the sky like a mountain top. Muscles and bones spring, instant force, arm strength enhanced. All for One activated quirks one after another. His right arm had swelled 3 to 5 times, staring at Li Tian below, waving his arm, a terrifying power erupted. The shock wave visible to the naked eye started from All for One, and did not intentionally aim at Li Tian, but suddenly exploded downward. The shock wave carried huge force and bombarded the ground, shaking. Created a terrible storm. Punch after punch, under Alpharone's frenzied attack, the area of nearly a kilometer centered on him was shrouded in a smashing and violent storm. In the storm, Best Jeanist was blown away like a rag doll. In this storm, like the might of God, he had no power to resist. But at this moment, the golden lightning of Li Tian's incarnation pierced through the storm, directly picked up Best Jeanist, and quickly ran wildly. But in this violent storm, Li Tian ran desperately to dodge the flying sand and rocks and the sharp storm. He could only do so much in this situation. He couldn't organize any effective attack against All for One in midair at all. He can't even jump out of this area. It's okay for this kind of terrifying attack to break out in this uninhabited area, but once Li Tian introduces it into the city, the damage and casualties it will cause are unimaginable, even if Li Tian is not Real heroes can't do this kind of thing. In the raging storm, Li Tian kept dodging with Best Jeanist on his shoulders, and had no time to count how long the countdown had passed. Finally, all for one, all for one, All Might's roar exploded from the sky. In the darkness in the distance, a black shadow that looked no bigger than a pea leapt towards All for One from the horizon. It's finally here. All Might, All for One stopped attacking and suddenly turned to look over. In just a second or two, the bean-sized black shadow quickly grew in size, and the figure of All Might appeared in the eyes of All for One. Give it all back, All for One. Accompanied by All Might's roar, All Might and All for One in midair seemed to be a comet hitting the earth, and the terrifying aftermath suddenly erupted from the place where the two collided and swept away. Hey, don't be so exaggerated. Li Tian twitched his lips. Below, the storm that had stopped just now because All for One turned to face All Might was swept away by the aftermath of the collision between the two. Li Tian exploded with super speed and force at full speed, carrying the already bewildered Best Jeanist, and ran away quickly. Now that All Might has come, they naturally don't have to drag All for One here, and they can make an honorable exit. A second later, Li Tian was more than 1,000 meters away from where he was just now, and he appeared outside the attack range of the two wild beasts with Best Jeanist on his shoulders. Hoo-ha! Li Tian put down the Best Jeanist and took a deep breath. Although the storm just now wouldn't threaten him, running in that kind of place is quite exhausting. Boom, boom, boom. Li Tian looked at the two people who collided with each other in midair in the distance, accompanied by the sound of drums beating and the strong wind that swept across the world. The corners of his mouth twitched and he complained, "Are those two guys monsters?" To be honest, Li Tian had this feeling when he was in Woying in his previous life. If the combat effectiveness of heroes from other professions is 34,500, then the combat effectiveness of All Might and All for One has soared to 81 million. It's completely fault-like rolling. Even if it is him, there is no way to insert into that kind of battlefield, and Ding Tian is close to relying on speed to circle. But just like All for One just now, it is completely possible to directly suppress him in midair in that brutal way, and with Alpharon's quirks, if it is aimed at Li Tian has no idea what quirks the opponent will take against him. Monster, you have the face to say it. Hearing Li Tian's complaints, the corners of Best Jeanist's eyes twitched, suppressing the urge to leave in pain. After all, his speed couldn't hit Li Tian at all. Best Jeanist, that opponent is very strong. The battle between him and All Might may spread to a large area. What is the distance for the surrounding crowd to evacuate? Li Tian turned his head and asked. The evacuation distance. Best Jeanist was surprised suddenly. No, the evacuation range is only 2 kilometers around the factory. Then we have to quickly increase the evacuation range. Looking at it like this, I don't think it's too much to evacuate around 5 kilometers or even 10 kilometers. Li Tian pointed to the scene where there seemed to be two giant beasts expanding. Best Jeanist also nodded, although the police and other professional heroes should have issued an evacuation order, but he also had to notify again. After saying that, Best Jeanist quickly took out the radio from his body and informed the police to expand the evacuation range to a 5-kilometer range. And Li Tian watched from afar that it didn't look like a human battlefield at all. Li Tian reckons that he needs to reach Mach 10 at least, and then he punches with all his strength regardless of the broken arm, so that the damage can barely reach that level, this size. However, as a result of that, Li Tian estimated that he would have to lie in the hospital for a long time. No, I have to hurry up and find out how to punch out with all my strength without hurting myself. Li Kai secretly said in his heart. He remembered one of the Speed Force moves when the Flash delivered a blow at nearly the speed of light with the force of an infinite mass blow from an oncoming white dwarf. If the Speed Force had no way to remove its power, Li Tian would not have believed that a mortal body like the Flash could withstand the reaction force of swinging that kind of fist. Li Tian squinted his eyes and looked at the battlefield, thinking in his heart whether he was looking for an opportunity to take All for One a cold shot. Otherwise, what if All Might's body can't hold on anymore? Why did he plan to promote the Battle of Shenye in advance? Isn't it to prevent All Might from defeating All for One before the embers of One for All burn out, so that the dangerous situation in the original book will not appear? Student Li Tian. Best Jeanist put down the phone and spoke suddenly, looking at Li Tian seriously. Don't tell me that there are still people who haven't been evacuated on the battlefield. Let me go there to save people. Li Tian looked at Best Jeanist's serious face, and said with a twitch of his mouth, it shouldn't happen so much. What a bloody thing. Of course not. This neighborhood is not a densely populated area, and the nearby people have already been evacuated, and the farther places are also being evacuated. With the help of other professional heroes and the police, it will take only a few minutes. It can complete the evacuation within a radius of 5 kilometers. Best Jeanist shook his head and said, I just suddenly remembered something and wanted to ask you. What is it? Li Tian asked strangely. You and MT. Ladies should be related by aunt and nephew, right? Xiao Bao Niu Xiaoyan left his mouth and said. Yes. Li Tian seemed to understand what Best Jeanist wanted to ask, and said with a firm scalp. Then why did you look for me when you needed authorization just now? Instead of looking for UMT. Lady, if I didn't give you authorization, would you really rush straight up? Best Jeanist narrowed his eyes and looked at Li Tian. Open your mouth and say. Mr. Best Jeanist. Li Tian straightened his face and said righteously, look over there, the number 1 heroes All Might is now in a tough fight. As the number 4 professional heroes, shouldn't there be a way to help All Might defeat the villains? Best Jeanist doesn't speak. A stare at. Quote. Li Tian looked at Best Jeanist's serious eyes. Emphasis added, then what? Isn't that my aunt is just a newcomer heroes? It's only been a year since her debut. What if students like me are authorized to fight with quirks and are punished afterwards? If the punishment is too severe and my aunt's income is greatly reduced, how can our family eat? Now that I am growing up, I have to eat more than 100 people's meals a day. Is it possible that I will go to other places every day? Looking for a cafeteria in the city that hasn't banned me. As for your number 4 professional heroes, it's different. Leaving aside the punishment that may not exist, even if the punishment happens, wouldn't it be sprinkled on you? Just rush at me and save you for so many times, you can't let our family not open the pot. In the end, Li Tian became inexplicably righteous. There are too many slots, and Best Jeanist is unable to complain. Especially the last sentence, which blocked all the words of Best Jeanist. I didn't mean that, Xiao Baoniu said. Haha, I knew how the number 4 professional heroes could care about such a trivial matter. Well, All Might is in a hard fight over there. I'll see if I can give that villains a cold shoulder. Come on, let's go first. Before the word, fell, Li Tian's figure instantly turned into a flash of lightning and galloped away, disappearing in Best Jeanist's sight. Looking at the disappearing Li Tian, Best Jeanist opened his mouth, but in the end he didn't say anything. In the night sky, a helicopter of a TV station hovered high in the sky, but it didn't dare to get too close. After all, the aftermath of the battle between All Might and All for One was too terrifying. Shooting from a distance. But it is also because of the long shooting distance that the tragedy of the battle between All Might and All for One can be fully shown. A nightmarish scene. According to the information we have received, there is only one villain who destroyed the city this time, and it has only been about 2 minutes since the start of the battle. Half of the Shenye district has been reduced to ruins. At this time the person fighting that villains is All Might, our symbol of peace. On the helicopter, a dedicated female reporter presided over the camera. And the pictures captured by the camera were quickly broadcast to all parts of the country when they were sent back to the TV station. Hello, this feels bad. The city turned into ruins in 2 minutes. That villains is so strong. What about the other heroes? All Might will definitely get rid of the villains. All over the country, the people who saw this live broadcast of Shenye held different opinions. Some were making sarcastic remarks, some were frightened and frustrated, and some even gloated and didn't take it seriously. But more people firmly believed in All Might can defeat villains. After all, it is a symbol of peace. All Might. However, besides the public, there was a group of people in front of the screen who were furious. How dare those reporters? Didn't you warn them that this incident should not be rebroadcasted with great fanfare? Asshole reporter. A group of high-level bosses who knew about today's action watched the TV broadcast and gritted their teeth angrily, wishing they could go directly to the scene and throw the reporter away. Others don't they know yet? The villains this time is All for One, the man who seriously injured All Might. If All Might is a symbol of peace, then AI for one was a symbol of darkness and evil in the past. All Might can win, right? Suddenly, a senior official asked in a deep voice. Absolutely can win, he is a symbol of peace. The other person said in a deep voice. That voice seemed to be answering and giving himself firm confidence. No matter what, let's start preparing according to the worst plan. No matter what happens, the fall of All Might can't cause chaos in the country. Perhaps this is our punishment for relying on one person all the time. All the high-ranking officials present couldn't help being silent. As early as 6 years ago, when the symbol of peace was seriously injured and could not be cured, they had actually expected this scene, but the domestic peace at that time could not be said to be entirely due to All Might alone. People's deterrence is established, but there is no doubt that All Might's deterrence accounts for more than 80%. It is said that All Might please others to hide it and not to speak out, but without their help, I don't want the symbol of peace to fall so quickly. Okay, 6 years, although De Liang is still on All Might, but losing All Might doesn't mean we have no power to fight. Another senior government official clapped his hands. It only needs to persist for a few years, and there is news from my island that the research on that thing is about to be successful. Exist. The executives in the field all nodded, and everyone's face became a little more relaxed, but when they saw the picture on the screen, they inevitably became heavy again. Qian Chenjiao, the battlefield of All Might and All for One. All Might, when did your fist become so weak? All for One looked at All Might with a sneer and taunted, it's because I was with you 6 years ago. Big hole in the stomach. With a smile on his face, All Might punched All for One and fell into the ruins. Who are you talking about getting weaker? All for One. Ha ha. Struggling to stand up from the ruins, All for One laughed indifferently. If it was 6 or 7 years ago, you would have killed my companions one by one. I should have been defeated by the punch just now, right, Tiger? If it was 6 years ago, you would never have let me hit you. All Might retorted without hesitation, walking towards All for One with a strong body, eyes full of firmness. The embers of One for All in his body will disappear soon. All for One is a dangerous villain, he must not leave it to the next generation, this is what he made. The last possible mission for the symbol of peace. I was injured by that brat before, and the remaining strength can't support too much time for quirks to use at the same time. It seems that there is no way to proceed as planned. Feeling the condition of the body, All for One was still extremely calm, and could not help but glance at the location of the residential building not too far away. Don't be delusional, the people around here have already been evacuated. I was preparing for today's battle more than a month ago. All Might looked at All F. The movement of Aron said in a deep voice. All for One was stunned and finally understood the whole story of the attack, more than a month ago. More than a month ago. Was it USJ time? All for One was stunned and finally understood the whole story of the attack. I really underestimated you, All Might. It's really incredible that I can find out the existence of my 3 important bases through a Nomu. All for One shook his head and said with emotion. It's not so much that you underestimated me, it's better to say that you underestimated heroes and this ever-advancing era. You are a drag of an era destined to be swept into the corner of history. All Might looked at Alpharon's sinking said loudly. A dregs of the times. All for One chuckled, indeed we are all the dregs of the times. During the duel with you, I noticed that One for All is no longer in your body. You have passed on One for All. All for One said, and the right hand that had recovered to normal suddenly became fat again, and the terrifying power condensed in the arm. If you use it now, isn't it just a residue? Even if you don't care about you, I'm afraid it won't be long before it will completely disappear in your body. All Foe 033, Roan suddenly laughed, I'm really lucky when I think about it. Originally, I planned to destroy this peaceful society that you have built. But if you don't destroy this society when you are a symbol of peace, wouldn't it be meaningless? All for One roared angrily. The fat, non-human monster swung its arms violently, and a terrifying shock wave was about to roar out. All Might's leg muscles tensed suddenly, and he was about to take off and dodge with all his might. Is it really good to avoid it? All for One laughed loudly and said, the shock wave of this blow can extend to 2 kilometers away. There seems to be a large number of people who are preparing to evacuate. People. All Might paused and stopped. The shock wave visible to the naked eye suddenly roared out, and directly bombarded All Might's body. Drink. With a yell, All Might's muscles swelled suddenly, and a terrifying force erupted against the shock wave roaring in front of him, and the same strong shock wave directly neutralized Aepharon's attack. What a terrifying power! As the creator of One for All, even I never thought it would develop into such a power. All for One praised with a chuckle. However, how many times can this level of attack be launched with the One for All embers in your body that will soon go out if you don't care about it? It's so many, it can completely defeat you. All Might roared, and appeared in front of All for One in an instant, punching out loudly. Really? All for One chuckled, and retreated without any resistance. Hurry up and stop me. Otherwise, I'm afraid I will fly directly to the people in that direction. All Might gritted his teeth, rushed over quickly, appeared behind All for One, and punched out again. Several times in succession, All for One was bombarded by All Might in midair like a ball, but Aepharon's face did not show the slightest anger, but kept opening its mouth to irritate All Might. Playing, destroying, robbing, and seizing opportunities to dominate others, all I know is arrogantly laughing at ordinary people who are running for their lives. All Might looked at the constant threats and provocations in midair, and every punch of his All for One contained extreme anger. I can't forgive this. Accompanied by the roar, All Might's figure suddenly appeared in the sky above All for One, and a powerful fist was ruthlessly imprinted on Aepharon's face. Aepharon's whole body was like a meteor, hitting the ground heavily, and the ground suddenly broken. Hoo-hoo, All Might panted, staring fixedly at the place where All for One fell. All for One is not so easily knocked down. Have you started to get tired? Sure enough, Aepharon's voice came from some deep pit, and immediately after that, Aepharon's intact figure walked out of the air indifferently. How could it be? All Might narrowed his eyes suddenly. Even if he knew that it was impossible to knock down All for One with that blow, how could he be unscathed? As much as you hate me, I love you too. All Might, I killed your teacher, but you also took away everything I worked so hard to build, and left my body with a scar that can't be healed. All for One said with a calm and terrifying expression, looking at All Might lightly. Shock absorption. Although this quirks has an upper limit, for you who are far from your peak, you need at least 100 punches to exceed this upper limit. All for One looked at his hands and couldn't help it shaking his head. He said, what a shame. In the heyday, I'm afraid 2 punches can break through this upper limit, and the 3rd punch can defeat me. 100 punches. All Might showed horror on his face, and then he became firmer, clenched his fists. If that's the case, then I will knock you down with 1 punch with a strength beyond the prime of my life. Hee hee, ha ha, it really is your style, you are so stubborn, so stubborn. All for One laughed loudly, although it is a bit hasty and not fully prepared, but this is the end of the matter, then I'll tell you. League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki, the head of the villains organization that was so small that the invading hero was beaten back in a few minutes, before I found out that he was adopted. His name was Jihei Zhuanjia. Shimura. All Might shuddered suddenly, his eyes showed extreme horror. No, it's impossible, he is the grandson of the previous One for All Shimura Nana. All for One said jokingly, I have been thinking about what else can take away your face besides destroying this society with a symbol of peace. Smile on my face, and then I thought. It would be interesting if the grandson of the previous teacher, One for All Shimura Nana, who was a symbol of peace, were to destroy this society with his own hands. No, you fool, how dare you. The smile on All Might's face disappeared completely. Extreme anger, All Might's forehead was full of bulging veins. It seems that I have finally captured a little bit of your smile. All Forohe said with a smile. Then, boom, a golden thunder roared from a distance, like a thunder coming into the world. It directly blasted on Aepharon's body in the blink of an eye, smashing All for One in midair directly to the ground. I think, maybe we need some help here. Li Tian's figure appeared not far away and said in a deep voice. You are. All Might was taken aback, looking puzzled at the sudden departure. At this time, because of the camera in the sky, Li Tian shook his head rapidly the moment he appeared, making his face blurred and difficult to recognize. Even the voice in his throat was changed by vibrating the vocal cords. Ahem, so it's Li Tian's classmate. All for One coughed violently and got up from the ground again and turned to look at Li Tian. Li Tian looked at All for One, who had no eyes and nose on his head, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Although it looked terrifying, it always gave him the urge to complain. Student Li Tian had better not use that kind of attack just now. All for One coughed twice while covering his mouth, his steps staggered a little, 2 hits at most, then I will be killed directly. If you want to be a symbol of peace, you probably don't want to see your students get their lives on their hands. As he spoke, All for One spread out 10 smears of bright red blood on his palm as if confirming what he said. He vomited blood. Li Tian was dumbfounded. Is his attack that strong? Twice, it was more ruthless than All Might's dozens of punches. You are Li Tian. All Might first glanced at Li Tian in surprise, and then looked at All for One who was spitting out blood. He couldn't tell whether All for One was really injured or just pretending. But All for One should not pretend to be injured just because of Li Tian's appearance. That is, young Li Tian's attack has done him a lot of damage. All Might focused his eyes and said in a deep voice, Young Li Tian, stand aside, you cannot intervene in this battle. In fact, even if All Might didn't say it, Li Tian felt a little terrified. What is a maximum of 2 hits? Doesn't that mean that if you say it once, you may die? Kill. Are you going to kill someone? Li Tian showed hesitation on his face. Although he thought about this kind of thing after traveling, but after confirming that this is my English world, he never thought about it again. Even if the target is a murderous villains. Li Tian also had some difficulties getting over the threshold in his heart. After all, he was just an ordinary person in his previous life, not a ferocious criminal who killed people like him. Kill. Are you going to kill someone? Li Tian showed hesitation on his face. Although he thought about this kind of thing after traveling, but after confirming that this is my English world, he never thought about it again. Even if the target is a murderous villains. Li Tian also had some difficulties getting over the threshold in his heart. After all, he was just an ordinary person in his previous life, not a ferocious criminal who killed people like him. But leaving like this, Li Tian was not reconciled. At most, I don't need that trick just now. Li Tian said hesitantly in a low voice. Back off. You are just a seedling that needs to be protected. This is, as a hero's duty. All Might stepped forward and said in a deep voice. But you. Li Tian looked at All Might, whose body had begun to emit slight steam, with a hint of worry in his eyes. He didn't want All Might, the symbol of peace, to fall, at least, not now. As the mainstay of peace in the entire society, if All Might falls, the villains lurking everywhere will surely swarm out. At that time, the 5% minimum crime rate in this society, I am afraid that there will be a sharp rebound. This is not what Li Tian wants to see, or just throw him another lightning bolt. Li Tian looked at All for One with a flash of ruthlessness in his eyes. You've done enough. All Might seemed to see what Li Tian was thinking, and said with a big smile at Li Tian, All for One, after being hit by your attack, is now weakened. A lot. I'm All Might. Seeing All Might's smiling face and slightly thin cheeks, Li Tian couldn't help but fell silent. If he's gone, then this could be All Might's final battle as #1 heroes. Does he seem to have changed nothing? Is that man whose painting style is above the whole world going to disappear after all? Don't lose. Li Tian turned around, and after leaving the last sentence, he instantly turned into a golden bolt of lightning and disappeared into the eyes of All Might, All for One and the cameras in the sky. After turning around, Li Tian didn't stay behind, and quickly ran all the way to the place where a large number of people were evacuating in the distance. There, he saw his Aunt Mt. Lady, who was thrown out by him before, and 7 other professions heroes. As for the policemen, Li Tian couldn't recognize them because of their identical team uniforms. However, they should all be safe and sound. He didn't say hello, and he didn't stop to wait for the outcome of the battle. There was no way All Might would lose anyway. Li Tian passed through the crowded crowd directly above the building, the people fleeing for their lives, the busy professional heroes and the police. No one noticed the golden flash on the building in the corner of their eyes. Quickly running on the wilderness between the cities, along the railway line. Even the Shinkansen takes 2 hours to drive, and the faster and faster you run on the road, the faster and faster Li Wei returned to the city where his home is located in less than 5 minutes. When he got home, his aunt was still in the Sheno area, and Sister Wei was also not at home because of work. Li Tian went back to the room directly, and lay down on the bed without turning on the light. He didn't know why he was like this, but Li Tian just felt so tired and sleepy now, he just wanted to have a good sleep. In a daze, Li Tian unconsciously fell asleep. Jingle bell, jingle bell. A cell phone ringing woke Li Tian up from sleep. Woo! Li Tian rubbed his eyes, got up from the bed and stretched, then took out the phone from his pocket to take a look. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. Li Tian muttered. He got home around 8 o'clock last night, and fell asleep right away. This sleep lasted 11 hours. Hello. After connecting the phone, Li Tian shouted lazily. Boy, where did you go? On the other end of the phone, Yu Shanyu in the police station yelled angrily, which attracted the attention of the policemen and professional heroes beside him. The roar on the phone directly made Li Tian take the phone away from his ear. That's right, it was his aunt who called him, and it looked like he only called one or two. I'm at home. After the roar stopped, Li Tian took the phone again and pressed it to his ear and said. At home. Yu Shanyu in the police station had bulging veins on his forehead. After such a big incident happened last night, he patted his butt and went home after it was over. I came back last night. While talking on the phone, Li Tian quickly got dressed, and then began to wash. If he did not miscalculate, the next step would be, boy, within half an hour, come to the police station in Kanagawa to take a statement. Yu Shan yelled angrily. Hey, half an hour is too short, it takes 2 hours by car. Li Tian grumbled as he brushed his teeth with an expression like that. Then you run over to me. Yu Shanyu shouted, and then hung up the phone directly. Mount, lady, is it Li Tian's call? On the side, Best Jeanist, who had been attracted by Mt. Lady's call, asked. Yeah, Yu Shanyu gritted his teeth indignantly and said, that fool went home last night after it was over. Go home. Even Best Jeanist was speechless when he heard Yu Shanyu's words. As the direct participants of this incident, after last night's incident subsided, they all came to the police station to make statements after checking that there were no injuries. The third most important person in All for One after the two of them actually patted their buttocks and went home to sleep. You know, looking for Li Tian who broke into the battlefield and then left when All Might and All for One were fighting on the internet is crazy. Some people are guessing what Li Tian's quirks are, what Li Tian's identity is, why he appeared there, guessing whether Li Tian is a villain's or a hero's, but the most people still scold Li Tian for leaving at that time on the battlefield, those who refused to save All Might, and those who excused Li Tian to leave. After all, the camera clearly captured that it was All Might who took the initiative to let Li Tian leave. But no matter what, for Li Tian, the third person who appeared on the battlefield of All Might and All for One, besides the revelation of All Might's true appearance and retirement, this news is the most popular news on the internet. Thinking of this, Yu Shanyu couldn't help but feel a little hesitant on his face. He didn't know if his kid could receive this kind of internet violence. I forgot to remind that kid not to go online first. Yu Shanyu looked down at the phone, murmuring softly, hesitating whether he was calling Li Tian and reminding Li Tian not to go online. But thinking about it now, it feels a bit late. Li Tian probably has already seen what he should have seen. Indeed it is. At this time, Li Tian looked at the phone that was hung up by his aunt, with a look of helplessness on his face. It will be very tiring to run to Kanagawa from here. However, this dress is really not bad. Yaoyorozu Wan's intelligence is very good. It's trustworthy. Li Tian looked at his denim underwear in the mirror. In such a fierce battle last night, he ran at full speed without letting the clothes burn. Although it doesn't feel as comfortable and flexible as the hero's suit, the heat-resistant and high-temperature insulation performance is definitely better than that of ordinary firefighting suits, and it is also much better to wear than ordinary clothes. Expensive really has the advantage of being more expensive. Li Tian sighed, and opened the phone. The first thing that catches your eyes is the missed messages and unread text messages. My aunt Yu Shanyu has 134 missed calls and 61 unread text messages, and there are also missed calls and unread text messages from other students and Mr. Aizawa, which add up to not much less than my aunt. Hey, there are so many, it's really wise to set Do Not Disturb on your phone. Li Tian clicked his tongue, opened the text message and looked up. My aunt's text messages basically asked where Li Tian went, why he didn't answer the phone, and asked Li Tian to come to the police station to take notes. As for the text messages from his classmates, they also asked if it was him who appeared on the battlefields of All Might and All for One. As for Aizawa Shota, it's a simpler text message, a visit to his office when school starts. Hey, it looks like the young master is really famous. Li Tian sighed with emotion. He is no longer the Loki who just crossed over. He has even become the kind of Mr. Aizawa who can say hero's name. Not many people know the idea of heroes anymore. Although I still don't want to be surrounded by reporters and pay attention to people everywhere I go like All Might and many professional heroes, but I don't care about it deliberately. As for the reason, it's not because Li Tian heard about his income from All Might. It's definitely not the reason why Li Tian finds that his appetite is getting bigger and bigger with the speed. After roughly reading the text messages, Li Tian started to look up the news. As expected, the content of the news was all reports of the Battle of Kano. What a vicious villains destroying the city is finally defeated by All Might. There are even some supernatural journalists who have dug up the news that this is a group of villains gathered together by professional heroes and the police. Even Li Tian saw his own news. Of course, the news reports only said that during the final battle between All Might and the brutal villains, a mysterious person appeared to help All Might and then evacuated. Below, Li Tian saw various comments. Some said that the mysterious man belonged to a certain professional heroes and also said that the mysterious man was also a villains, but had a grudge against that cruel villains. Even there are also those who are scolding the mysterious person for running away, and some are apologizing for the mysterious person. All in all, Li Tian reads the series of comments with gusto, and occasionally despises some comments that are far away. However, compared to those news, among countless news homepage reports, the revelation of All Might's true face is the most sensational and eye-catching. Li Tian even saw that some journalists, in order to attract attention, reported indiscriminately and inadvertently guessed the truth that All Might had been injured a long time ago and had been fighting with injuries for the past few years. This made Li Tian also have to admire extremely. Moreover, what surprised Li Tian the most was that he saw a lot of reports about the identity of villains all for one from some corners. Although many of them were speculations or falsehoods, one piece of news turned out to be the real identity of All for One. Identity information, including Alpharones, quirks, ability given to quirks by capturing quirks, and information on the identity of Alpharone's past dark symbol. However, the popularity of this news is not very wide, and even the comments below are deserted and there are not many people. However, the popularity of this news is not very wide, and even the comments below are deserted and there are not many people. Did the government take action? Li Tian was thoughtful. Except for the government and All for One himself, Li Tian couldn't think of anyone who had such detailed information about All for One. As an ordinary person, and an ordinary person who used to live in a peaceful world, Li Tian is completely unable to understand the thinking of this world government, but there should be their reasons. Shaking his head, he put the boring thoughts behind him. These are not the issues he should care about now. The speed force was activated instantly. Li Tian stopped dawdling, packed up quickly and went out directly. He was able to come back from Kanagawa along the railway last night, so he will naturally not get lost during the day. On the way, Li Tian was surprised to find that his speed was much faster than yesterday, even comparable to the usual half-month progress. Could it be that my super speed power can be improved in combat, and I can fight faster and faster, but I didn't fight much yesterday? Li Tian was a little puzzled. As for running around the two cities and getting stronger and stronger, he would go for a 30-minute long-distance run by the seaside every day, and the distance was much longer than this. Although only 5 minutes had passed in terms of the normal passage of time, for Li Tian, it was an indeterminate amount of time thinking with ultra-high-speed thinking, but in the end he still couldn't think of any suitable reason. After all, Li Tian is too unfamiliar with the source of his own strength. Kano, Yokohama City, Kanagawa Prefecture. Oh no, it's the police station in the district next door to Kano District. The police station in Kano District was accidentally affected during the battle last night, and it's almost half useless. This can't be said to be bad luck. After all, most of the Kano District was scrapped last night. After getting off the police car, beside Li Tian, Ant was still talking about Li Tian. After all, Mt. Lady was a little afraid of the battle last night just by watching the damage. She even had a face-to-face meeting with the villains of that level, and she was almost completely unharmed afterward. But thinking about her nephew at home fighting against that villains with Best Jeanist, and boldly intervening in the battle between All Might and All for One, MT. Lady's heart is still beating. So, she didn't want to revenge Li Tian so she could go back to sleep beautifully, but she had to stay up here to make a confession for revenge. Mount, Lady O HMPH. Name, Zhen Xuan Li Tian. Age, 15 years old. Where were you at 7 o'clock last night? Kano Ward Shopping Center, Yokohama City. Where and what? Go by. After arriving at the police station, Li Tian simply made a confession and recounted all the conversations between All for One and him before he was allowed to leave. After all, although Li Tian's appearance was a bit of a coincidence, the reason does not seem to be a problem. After all, no one would have thought that Li Tian would guess today's actions, and even today's events were all arranged by Li Tian in advance. The next situation. Even if the hands-on matter violated the regulations, as early as last night, the number 4 professional heroes Best Jeanist also endorsed Li Tian early, and even All Might brought up this matter from the hospital matter. How could the police, who had received the news a long time ago, still hold on to this point? What's more, they know that when the villains appeared, 8 professional heroes and 22 police mobile team members were rescued by Li Tian. If they dared to do something if it is difficult, those colleagues will never simply let them go. As for the specific results of last night's actions, Yu Shanyu also told Li Tian in detail in the police car. The first is All for One, who was arrested and imprisoned without a doubt, and even heard that on the way to the prison, he almost went to unheard without resisting the mission. Then Witch Doctor, and nearly 24 Nomu in the doctor's residence laboratory, faced with a group of veterans and winged heroes, Hawks plus the doctor who was one of the masterminds was arrested in advance. There is no doubt no Nomu can escape. I heard that even Nomu's manufacturing technology has been searched out by them. But without Alpharon's ability to capture and transfer quirks, presumably this manufacturing technology is basically half useless, and I am afraid that some of the research results in it can be used as a reference in other places. The last is the only part where there is an accident. League of Villains, Tamura Shigaraki and Kurogiri were captured and escorted, because a large number of professional heroes rushed to Kano to help Quan, so they were robbed by the mysterious villains on the way of mythology. It is said to be a mysterious person, but it is estimated that it should be the old part of All for One that has been hidden for a long time. But, when Li Tian heard this, he couldn't help thinking of the locator on Kurogiri's neck guard. According to some fragmented clues, Li Tian guessed that the locator didn't know that it was his hidden relationship, and Kurogiri didn't seem to find that he was the culprit who was captured this time. If the old part of All for One saves Kurogiri and Tamura Shigaraki after. That scene was so beautiful that Li Tian couldn't even imagine it. However, because of this incident, the authorities immediately changed the place where All for One was detained to a more secretive and stronger place. After all, even if Alpharon's escort level is higher, it is too suspicious that Alpharon's old subordinates did not rescue All for One, but only rescued Tamura Shigaraki. In short, even MT. Lady guessed this aspect when chatting with him, not to mention those upper-level figures who think more. As for Hero's killer Stain, he was sent to the prison safely because of the different arrest time with Tamura Shigaraki and Kurogiri, and the escort route was not the same. Hearing this, Li Tian couldn't help feeling a little bit different. Although Li Tian personally thinks that Stain's steadfast appearance is handsome, but, for this society, Stain's paranoid and dangerous thinking is the best thing to do. Just don't show up. Of course, these simple aftermaths caused by the advance of the Shenye battle are not Li Tian's concern. Although it was a simple record of a statement, it was already close to noon when it was finished, and then. At noon, Li Tian emptied most of the food in the canteen of the police station without changing his expression under the watchful eyes of the surrounding policemen and professional heroes, forcing the kitchen to work overtime urgently to buy food and cook. Did not delay other people's meals. Of course, Li Tian was really hungry and crazy because he was rushed to take notes early in the morning, and he didn't even have time to find a place to have breakfast. If there is anything in this world that can easily defeat Li Tian, it is hunger. Looking at the battlefield after Li Tian's struggle, beside MT. Lady, several professional heroes patted her on the shoulder comfortingly. They finally knew that when MT. Lady was greedy for money, she would open her mouth all day long. What does side mean? This is not an exaggeration, but a fact, not looking for a reason, but selling miserably. Is there something you asked me to come here at night? All Might. Yawning, Li Tian walked over to All Might by the sea with tears still in the corners of his eyes. It was almost 10 o'clock. Li Tian had already climbed into bed and was going to sleep, but All Might actually sent him a text message and wanted to meet him. According to the plot, shouldn't I be looking for Green Valley Izuku at this time? Could it be because Green Valley didn't show up in the Battle of Kano? Young Li Tian. All Might was still wearing a bandage, turned around and stared at Li Tian seriously. I'm here to apologize. I'm sorry for refusing your help last night. Saying that, All Might leaned slightly and wanted to bow. Farewell. Li Tian's voice sounded from behind All Might. If people find out that you bow to me, then I will be scolded to death. Li Tian couldn't help but wryly smiled. What happened this time really made Li Chong see how popular All Might, the hero's popularity ranking #1, is in this country. Haha, that's not enough. All Might laughed twice, turned around and looked at Li Tian with a serious face. Young Li Tian, I called you this time. Besides wanting you to apologize, I just want to tell you, don't feel burdened. I have a burden in my heart. Li Tian was taken aback, somewhat puzzled by All Might's words. Perhaps, young Li Tian, you feel powerless because I refused to intervene in the battle between All for One and me, so you feel burdened in your heart, but... All Might didn't notice the weird look in Li Tian's eyes, but looked at there was a trace of sadness in his withered arms and eyes. The power of One for All has supported the dream of a symbol of peace in his body for decades, and the last aftertaste has completely disappeared in that battle. This kind of thing, no matter how open-minded All Might is, cannot help but feel sad. Li Tian, you also know that my body has not allowed me to carry out heroes' activities for too long. The time for me to use my strength is getting shorter and shorter. Even if there is no battle yesterday, in half a year at most, I will be completely unable to continue fighting due to physical reasons. So, Li Tian, you don't need to feel guilty, but I should thank you. Thank you for allowing me the last leg of my hero's career, and I completed the last heroes as a symbol of peace's activities. Saying that, All Might looked up at Li Tian, and there was nothing but sincere gratitude in his eyes. Looking at All Might in front of him, Li Tian couldn't help but want to say something. All Might looked up at Li Tian, with nothing but sincere gratitude in his eyes. Looking at All Might in front of him, Li Tian couldn't help but want to say something. Old Iron, you think too much. Yes, at that time there was no way to intervene in the battle between All for One and All Might. Li Tian was indeed powerless, and had a thought that nothing could be changed. But in the final analysis, Li Tian is not a real 14 or 15-year-old boy, nor will he just go into a dead end just because of this kind of thing. If the life of more than 20 years in the previous life has given Li Tian the greatest help at this time, regardless of his strength, identity, and future, the ordinary person in the previous life does not know how many times. It is a correct 3 views, an incomparably good 1 mentality and a unique way of thinking. He is indeed powerless to change the final outcome of the battle between All Might and All for One. But has he really changed nothing? Leaving aside the arrest of Stain, without the video of Heroes Killer Stain, the villains are still just a mass of scattered sand, and have not been able to gather together. Besides, this Battle of Shenye, because of Li Tian, Heroes prepared for this Battle of Shenye a full month in advance, and firmly grasped the initiative. Although there were also accidents that caused the final battle, the loss of property is still not small, but compared to the hasty fight, frequent accidents, and huge casualties in the original book, this simply doesn't need to change too much. What's more, the original battle between Shen and Yi took place after All Might forcibly used One for All many times, and the embers of One for All in his body were already on the verge of extinguishing when they fought All for One. Finally defeated All for One. But now, because of Li Tian's intervention, Alpharon's injury has been aroused. Although the battle with All Might has exposed the fact that All Might is seriously injured and unable to fight anymore, the whole process of the battle is basically in the hands of All Might. The final victory did not rely on a miracle, but the power of All Might. Moreover, for All Might, who was doomed to lose One for All long ago, being able to burn everything in the battle with All for One and end the career of professional heroes at the peak, this is the best ending for All Might. Although it can be said that he calculated All Might in the Battle of Shenye, Li Tian never thinks that he was All Might at this point. Li Tian has already figured out all this, and this is why Li Tian can calmly face All Might. But speaking of it, here his predecessor did All Might a favor. The parents of the predecessor, both professional heroes, sacrificed their lives because of the Keeley Square incident, and the heroes who solved the villains who caused the Keeley Square incident is All Might. Therefore, Li Tian, who has inherited everything from his predecessor, really owes All Might a huge favor. This incident is said to be calculated, but there is also the meaning of wanting to return the favor to All Might. Forget it, try to help All Might cultivate Green Valley. This may be the only way I can return All Might's favor. Li Tian looked at the scrawny All Might in front of him, and a flash of melancholy flashed in front of his eyes. All Might, the aftermath of the fallen symbol of peace, is much, much bigger than what Li Tian imagined. Looking at the various miscellaneous problems reported in the news all over the country because of All Might's retirement, Li Tian's scalp is numb just looking at it, and he can't imagine how to solve these troublesome things. All Might at its peak can be said to be a miracle. One person has resisted the torrential waves that can endanger a country for decades, but now the miracle has disappeared. Facing such waves, other professional heroes' personal power is simply insignificant to inconceivable. Faced with this situation, Li Tian didn't know how the high-level people who grew up here would make decisions to deal with it, but just from Li Tian's perspective and experience, he couldn't think of other ways except to create a new symbol of peace. Wei. Fortunately, the ass decides the head, and it's not up to Li Tian to worry about these things, not now, let alone in the future. His ideal is not to become a symbol of peace, this title is too big and too heavy. He can't bear it now, and he doesn't want to bear it in the future. Li Tian doesn't have much ambition, nor does he have much ideal. The ideal life is probably to become a professional hero who can earn enough money for his own meals. He doesn't have to work hard to cook every day. It's not bad to eat, but he's about to vomit, and then at the end get married, start a family, go out on patrol, and study your own superpowers. As for other things, that is to follow the circumstances. In the final analysis, Li Tian actually doesn't have any sense of belonging to this country, or even the country on the other side that is similar to the motherland of his previous life, or even this world. Perhaps 100 years ago, the two worlds were somewhat similar, but during the century-long darkness and turmoil, those familiar and unfamiliar to Li Tian have already changed beyond recognition. In this current Earth, apart from the arc of the map, Li Tian still feels familiar, other. It's been different for a long time. Tick-tick, tick-tick. The drizzle in the sky was dripping. At the foot of the mountain of Xiangying High School, holding an umbrella, Li Tian walked towards Xiangying. Li Tian, wait for me. Li Tian. Behind Li Tian, Yi Yin's voice sounded, calling to stop Li Tian, who was walking forward quickly. Through. Li Tian turned around and shouted with a smile. The day before yesterday, was it really you, Li Tian, who was on the TV the day before yesterday? After Yi Yin walked in, he looked at Li Tian and couldn't help asking again. In fact, Li Tian had already talked to her many times on the phone, but that kind of thing is really unbelievable. Ah, it's me. Li Tian was not surprised by Yi Yin's question, and nodded directly in response. Since the day before yesterday, Yi Yin has already asked him on the phone several times. In reality, it is normal to ask him once, and he even said to wait until the class. Student Li Tian. As soon as they stepped into the class, they were crying like ghosts and howling like wolves. Many people rushed to Li Tian's side and started asking questions. The strange unknown heroes that appeared when All Might was fighting the terrifying villains was Li Tian, right? It was definitely you, right? Kirishima managed to get closer, her eyes widened, asked loudly. Kirishima's voice was loud, and the other students around were silent all of a sudden, staring at Li Tian with curiosity in their eyes. And the few who didn't come over, such as Hong and Bakugo, they also pricked up their ears and listened. It's me. Li Tian didn't hide the meaning of this group of students. The police did not specifically ask him to keep it a secret. It's really you. Kirishima's round eyes suddenly grew bigger. This is too exaggerated. Shiro Honta also opened his mouth wide in shock. The villains who can fight against All Might, Li Tian, you dare to go up and intervene. The most important thing is that you actually injured the villains. Pu Tao said in the end, the whole person was shocked, all roared. Mr. Li Tian, are you trying to compete with me for a job? Kaminari looked at Li Tian with an aggrieved expression on his face. Although the video of that day was not very clear, the powerful netizens analyzed it early. A mysterious man appeared and injured the villain's attack, which was a beam of lightning. Dark Judge. Tokiyami looked at Li Tian seriously and said in a deep voice. Li Tian looked at the inexplicably excited crowd speechlessly. Cough. Aizawa Shota's cough and footsteps came from the corridor. Whoosh. In an instant, everyone returned to their seats with super agility and sat silently. At the door of the classroom, Aizawa Shota glanced at the quiet and neat class, and then walked onto the podium. Everyone, I think you all know about the All Might incident 2 days ago. Aizawa Shota said weakly. Point 0. No, Ms. Aizawa, is it true that All Might can no longer fight? Will All Might still teach at Xiangyang? As soon as Aizawa Shota said this, the entire Class A exploded, and even Bakugo couldn't help asking. He is also an avid European chef. Anyway, just as the news said, All Might can no longer fight, and is now considered retired, but he will continue to serve as a teacher in Shanghai and pass on all the experience of heroes to the guest. You guys are unlucky to become a heroes in this era when the symbol of peace has been lost. Aizawa Shota scratched his head and said listlessly, in short, the campus life in the future may be worse than before. Make it 10 times or 8 times harder. Better than the original. 10 times and 8 times harder. Except for a few people, everyone else shouted and looked at Xiangsheng Shoutteeth in horror. Originally, Xiangyang's campus life was already suffering enough, but now it has increased by 10 or 8 times. Did they come to hell? Also, Li Tian, come to my office after class. Aizawa Shota stared at Li Tian and said. I see. Li Tian nodded with a wry smile. Then let's start the class. Aizawa Shota nodded, regaining his weakness. Today's heroes information science is a bit special. Special. Xiangyang's first class is 10 times or 8 times more difficult than before. What the hell will it be? All the students in the classroom grunted and watched Aizawa Shota nervously. The hero's code name is about the drafting of the hero's name. Aizawa Shota said. Everyone was stunned, blinking their eyes and looking at Aizawa Shota on the stage. Isn't it a demon test? Isn't it a Spartan training? Instead, decide on the hero's codename. Awesome. Exciting time is coming. Awesome. Exciting time is coming. Cheers instantly burst into the sky in this classroom. Don't be too happy too early. Aizawa Shota's eyes were fixed, and the pressure instantly appeared in everyone's hearts. Everyone shivered and then quickly fell silent. Looking at the teacher who had calmed down again, Aizawa Shota looked away, and said in a deep voice, the hero's code name decision this time is also related to the professional heroes recruitment application and workplace I mentioned after the sports festival, related to experiential activities. This application will come into effect after you have accumulated enough experience, that is, when you are in the 2nd and 3rd grades. Now, it just means that professional heroes are interested in your growth. If you graduate before, if the interest in you has weakened, this application may be cancelled. Aizawa Shota said lightly. My lord is really capricious. Kutao complained speechlessly. Of course, this was the situation before. Aizawa Shota changed the topic. Because of the incident of the Battle of Kano, the whole country has entered a state of anxiety, and the same is true for professional heroes. So, professional heroes' expectations for your growth will be several times higher than before, or even no longer expected. So, this workplace experience event will directly affect your future. Mr. Aizawa, 990, do you mean that our performance in this workplace experience activity will determine the evaluation of professional heroes to us? Yaoyorozu Wan raised his hand and said. That's what it means. Aizawa Shota nodded. If you don't perform well in this workplace experience, this application for you will not wait until you graduate, but will probably be cancelled directly. This is too random. Kutao didn't look speechless this time, but his face turned livid from being frightened. The others were too, and one by one they all became panicked. Okay, the specific situation is like this. Aizawa Shota glanced at the panicked students and said lightly, the specific job application form is here. In fact, many people failed to receive the application in previous years. But this year you are more famous. Hearing Aizawa Shota's words, everyone in the audience looked up. Projected numbers already appeared on the blackboard. Green Valley, 855. Bakugo, 755. Yi Yin, 360. Yaoyorozu million, 285. Iida, 236. From top to bottom, the names of the 20 students in the class all appeared on it. Although the grapes ranked last were relatively few, they still had double digits. It can be said that all members of Class A have made a name for themselves in this sports festival. Haha, Bakugo was bombed and Green Valley overtook it. Looking at the rankings on the blackboard, Kirishima said with a smile. I was scared by the final battle with Li Tian. After all, Bakugo's temper is so badass and scary. Zero laughed. Shut up, fool. Bakugo exploded instantly. Ahem, although you were one step ahead and made a name for yourself at the sports festival, but because of this, you will be subject to much stricter requirements when participating in the Professional Heroes experience. Aizawa Shota said lightly. As soon as these words came out, everyone who was relieved to see that they had been invited froze instantly and became nervous again. So, even if it's the tentative name of heroes, if anyone names me a random name, I will show him what hell is. The stern voice of the 18 Forbidden Girl heroes Midnight came from the door. Well, that's it. The tasting of the hero's name is handed over to Teacher Midnight. I'm not suitable for this kind of thing. Aizawa Shota said, took out his baby sleeping bag from the podium, and just got into it. He fell asleep on the podium leaning against the wall in a stately manner. Okay, I will take over the rest of the class. Midnight flicked the small whip in his hand, looked at the crowd with a smile and said, then I think students should also know that our school's curriculum is aggravated because of All Might things, and your first class after the wait is no exception, so. Midnight hooked his mouth, raised his hand and shouted, 10 heroes names per person, let's get started. What, 10 heroes names per person? Even Li Tian looked at Midnight on the podium in bewilderment. Just kidding. Midnight flicked her hair and winked at everyone charmingly. All the boys in the class blushed instantly. Oh asterisk hollow down pointing triangle asterisk Q. The so-called person lives up to his name. I think everyone has a plan for what heroes you will become in the future, and a hero's name that directly reflects your future is the easiest way for you to leave an impression on the public. The most straightforward way. Midnight looked at the crowd seriously and said. Name. Li Tian pointed at his chin and stared at the blackboard thoughtfully. He had already considered this a lot. Like the most direct flash, speed, or speed. Speedman, speedy man, flashman. Li Tian muttered one by one, but after thinking for a long time, Li Tian still felt that Flashman was the most powerful and suitable. After all, he ran at the current speed afterwards, lightning was his only symbol, and there were many lightning symbols on his battle clothes. Speedman, Flash. Li Tian revealed his title on the podium. Hey, Li Tian, are you really trying to compete with me for a job? Kaminari, who had just decided on his title as Lightning Thunder, widened his eyes and shouted aggrievedly. No way, why do so many people think that the speed of lightning is fast? Is it as fast as lightning? Li Tian shrugged his shoulders, pretending to be helpless. The corners of Kaminari's mouth twitched. This is mocking him. This is definitely mocking him. **Xiao #_. Heart of Tokyo. Don't keep a straight face, just smile. Explosive kill. Among the raging crowds at the station, Li Tian carried the suitcase containing his combat uniform, looked at Bakugo with a stinky face beside him with a smile and said, at any rate, we also chose the same firm partner by coincidence. Bakugo glared at Li Tian with bulging veins on his forehead. Why did you choose the same firm as me? Blast killer, don't slander people, it's obvious that you and I chose the same firm. Li Tian widened his eyes, and retorted, this time I went to Best Jeanist's firm for my workplace experience, but I was with him. We made an appointment the day before yesterday. Bakugo was startled. The appointment was made the day before yesterday, and with his intelligence, he instantly understood when Li Tian made an appointment with Best Jeanist, and his eyes were filled with extreme unwillingness. After playing against him during the day, go to fight against that vicious villains at night. Although Li Tian's figure in the camera was only fleeting, he didn't believe that with Li Tian's strength, appearing on the scene that day would be just a soy sauce. It was also at that moment that he suddenly understood the difference between him and Li Tian, and understood how ridiculous his behavior was at the Hero Sports Festival. Professional world. Bakugo's eyes were full of unwillingness. Although he is not reconciled, Bakugo has to admit that when he is still a student, the guy in front of him is already far ahead and has stepped into the professional field. He has even fought side by side with the top professional heroes. There is no small friendship. I will definitely surpass you. Bakugo stared at Li Tian, gritted his teeth. Hey, Bakugo, you are the best, hurry up. I don't care if you are late at Best Jeanist's office, but it's not good if you leave a bad impression on Best Jeanist. Li Tian said. He directly passed Bakugo, and walked forward with the box. Looking at the perfunctory Li Tian, Bakugo gritted his teeth and stomped his feet. Kiki didn't stomp his feet, and quickly followed with extreme unwillingness. No matter how much trouble he makes now, it is impossible for him not to go to Best Jeanist, or let Xiangying change to another firm. Although it is not very luxurious, it looks quite small and fresh in front of the two-story building. Shish, to open an office in this kind of location, professional heroes really make a lot of money. Li Tian said with a smile, raising his brows. But Bakugo didn't say a word, and directly opened the door and walked into the Best Jeanist office. Li Tian also raised his leg to follow. After explaining with the front desk of the office that they came for an internship, the two were arranged to go to the changing room to change into combat uniforms. On the second floor, the office entrance of professional heroes. The door opened suddenly, and an assistant from Best Jeanist heroes came out. When he saw Li Tian, he was stunned for a moment, and then smiled brightly. Yo, Li Tian, you are really here? What? Of course, that's a good deal. Besides, I'm afraid that any firm other than here go to will have a lower evaluation because of this matter. Li Wei laughed and patted his stomach and said jokingly. Haha, don't worry, we're full here. The man laughed as he said that. He had seen Li Tian's appetite in the police station, but he didn't pay for the money, right? This person is exactly one of the several professional heroes that Li Tian rescued that night in Shenye. He is a hero belonging to the Best Jeanist firm. Thank you. The Bull King is waiting for you inside, go in. The man opened the door for Li Tian, let Li Tian and Bakugo go in, and then greeted and walked out. On the other side, Bakugo couldn't help curling his lips when he saw all this happened. He was completely ignored. Good morning, Niu Wang. Looking at Best Jeanist in the distance, leaving greeted with a smile. Yeah, Best Jeanist nodded in greeting before saying, I've already arranged your internship. Li Tian, cowboy, come here. Yes, the desk not far away responded, and then a man wearing a Best Jeanist comb and a tight denim shirt stood up and walked to this side. This is a person that Li Tian has never met in the Battle of Shenye, and it seems that Best Jeanist didn't take everyone with him during the Battle of Shenye. But if you think about it, the hero's office here in Kyoto must leave someone to take a look. Student Li Tian, please come with me. Cowboy walked over and said with a smile as he walked away. Yes, Li Tian replied, and then followed. After Cowboy led Li Tian away, Best Jeanist stared at Bakugo and spoke. To be honest, I don't like you at all. Best Jeanist said simply and bluntly. Bakugo was also taken aback. The reason why you chose my firm must be because of my explosive popularity, which ranks among the top 5. Best Jeanist said with a light smile. Didn't you point out me? Bakugo curled his lips impatiently. Not bad. Best Jeanist nodded. I watched the whole process of the Heroes Sports Festival. Although you lost to Li Tian in the end, it was almost force majeure. In comparison, your performance early in the competition, active performance, whether it is the highly potential quirks that can be freely manipulated, or your excellent reflexes or skillful ability to master, it can be said that you are a hero who was hired as an assistant in the office on the spot. Strange genius. Bakugo looked at Best Jeanist, although he basically praised him, but he didn't feel happy at all. After all, what does it mean that losing to Li Tian is almost force majeure? Do you mean that it is absolutely impossible for me to win against that guy? Bakugo glared at Best Jeanist with bruised veins on his forehead. That's it, your fatal flaw. Best Jeanist looked at the irascible Bakugo and said softly, you have the cruel humanity that you believe in your heart that you are better than anyone else, and you will fulfill it regardless of means. Are you specifically pointing me out just to preach? Bakugo looked annoyed and looked at Best Jeanist with extreme impatience. Best Jeanist looked at Bakugo's denim cuffs with both hands indifferently. He didn't know when the denim cuffs had been taken apart. Countless slender and tough fibers had already bound Bakugo firmly in place. He said calmly, correct, you're this kind of problem child is also my job as a hero's. Unlike Bakugo, Cowboy led Li Tian directly to the back of the best jeanist office. Cowboy, it means cowboy. Li Tian looked at the cowboy in front of him and said. Yes, my hero's name is Cowboy's Cowboy. Cowboy nodded. Cowboy. Li Tian looked at Cowboy, except for the denim underwear, he really didn't see that Cowboy looked like a cowboy. Student Li Tian, thank you very much for the Shenye incident for saving Niu Wang and my colleagues. Cowboy said with a smile. It's easy to do, besides, they have thanked them many times. Li Tian waved his hand and said. I think Li Tian misunderstood me. Cowboy still chuckled. I mean, I'm very grateful to you for saving Niu Wang and my colleagues, but I won't let you down because of this matter. Just be merciful in your training. I wish for it. Li Tian was taken aback for a moment, and then laughed directly. Well, the Bull King has told me before that besides taking you to patrol and experience heroes' activities, focus on training your physical skills. Cowboy nodded and said. Physical arts. Li Tian couldn't help but startled. Well, to be honest, I have roughly watched all the videos about Li Tian at the Heroic Sports Festival. Except when Li Tian couldn't shoot with quirks, Li Tian's physical skills are really bad. Cowboy said bluntly. Is it bad? Li Tian scratched his head, he didn't feel that he was bad. It's bad. Cowboy still nodded unceremoniously, and at the same time pushed open the door on one side, and walked into a practice room, come in and leave the classmates. Li Tian glanced at it. This is a room of about 100 square meters, the floor is all wooden, but it is not brand new but a bit old, even cracks in many places. We don't use quirks, let's have a battle of pure body skills. Cowboy stood in the room and finally said. A battle of pure martial arts. Li Tian suddenly became interested. Speaking of it, he seems to have never fought anyone without using quirks. Okay, Li Tian agreed. In a flash of lightning, he took off Li Tian's combat uniform and put on the previous clothes. Since it was a duel of pure body skills, his battle clothes, whether it was light armor or the armor on his fists, of course had to be replaced. Seeing Li Tian's actions, Cowboy was also slightly taken aback, and then smiled. Then put his hands on his sides and made a gesture that didn't look like a fight, but rather like a cowboy preparing to draw his gun. Li Tian was slightly taken aback, but he didn't say anything. After all, his physical skills were very poor in the opponent's mouth, so how could he guide the opponent instead? Come here. Cowboy stared at Li Tian expressionlessly and said. Be careful. Li Tian reminded, clenched his fists with both hands in front of his chest, and lay down towards Cowboy leisurely with his feet. Very well, facing the villains is not mindless. Cowboy looked at Li Tian, with a flash of satisfaction in his eyes. Opportunity. Li Tian looked at Cowboy kicking hard, and rushed forward, a straight fist with his right hand mercilessly swung out with a whistling fist wind. So decisive, and this Rikido is worthy of being Xiangying's chief student this year, but... Cowboy looked at Li Tian, a smile flashed in his eyes. Too naive. The two hands placed by Cowboy's side suddenly moved, and one hand was lifted up quickly, directly pushing away Li Tian's fist. But the other hand directly hit Wanglong towards Li Tian's face. At that speed, even Li Tian could only see an afterimage. Before he could react in time, he raised his other hand to block it. Jab. However, Cowboy's foot stepped in, directly inserted behind Li Tian's foot. The right hand that was blocked by Li Tian turned into a fist with force, and a burst of force suddenly broke out, pushing Li Tian suddenly. But in a hurry, Li Tian was at a time when the old strength was changing. The old and the new strength were not yet born. Li Tian didn't have time to exert strength when he pushed out with this palm. He was pushed out and then tripped by the steps under his feet. He staggered. Li Tian couldn't help it. Take 2 or 3 steps with your feet back before regaining your footing. The foot is very stable. Cowboy's eyes lit up, and he praised Li Tian. His palm of Rikido is not weak, and with the addition of tripping legs, even ordinary professional heroes will be pushed to the ground. On the ground, but Li Tian regained his footing in just 2 or 3 steps. What a quick move. Steady his body. Li Tian was in a daze. Even if he didn't use the speed force, his body was transformed by the speed force after all. Amazing enough, even stronger than Bakugo, who is known for his excellent motor nerves, with 3 pointers. But even so, there was no time to block Cowboy's movements. Among them, although Li Tian's combat experience was Xiaobai's reason, Cowboy's movement speed at that time was absolutely astonishing, and because of the initial jab, Li Tian couldn't notice the covert movement of his feet at all. As for Li Tian's lower body, he practiced boxing in the sea every day, not just for him to practice a supersonic punch. Fighting, it's not about punching at the right time or fighting. Cowboy clapped his hands and smiled, you still have a lot to learn. The physical exercise is very good. Although the muscles are a little stiff and the muscles and bones are not stretched, it should not take a few days to change the exercise method. The lower plate is also stable enough, which can save a lot of effort. Cowboy squeezing Li Tian's muscles, he nodded in satisfaction. Li Tian looked at Cowboy with some embarrassment. It was the first time he felt shy when being touched by a man. Okay, let me teach you some simple fighting steps today. Cowboy thought for a while before deciding to speak. Pace. Li Tian began to think about it. Even Xiaobai knew that fighting was never a silly thing where you cut me with a knife, and I punched you with a punch, but with each other constantly changing positions, like a phantom fighting against each other, and the pace of the feet is the most important thing. Li Tian was a little hesitant. Could he really use it? You must know that once the speed force is activated, his speed will be increased by 150 to 60 times. Then Li Tian's fight is basically the same as hitting a fixed target. As for the dodging of the steps, it is basically useless to Li Tian. He can run hundreds of meters when the other party takes a step. As if seeing what Li Tian was thinking, Cowboy suddenly laughed and said, why, because of your super speed quirks, don't you like your pace? It's not that I don't like it, but do I really need to learn it? Compared with dodging steps, I think learning fighting routines is more important. Li Tian said softly. That's right, compared to dodging steps, what Li Tian, who possesses super speed, wants to learn martial arts fighting routines more. The so-called useless routines are nothing but fart in Li Tian's opinion. The routines are not just for you to perform every move, but for you to know how to protect your fists and how to quickly withdraw your fists when punching. Know how to swing the next punch quickly, know how to block the counterattack with the least cost. Any fighting art in the world has so-called routines, otherwise, putting on a posture and shouting is martial arts, wearing gloves and punching a sandbag is boxing. Indeed, Cowboy nodded and said, for you, after learning the steps, it won't make you run faster, and even stepping on the steps will even slow down your speed, but, the so-called strength starting from the ground, if you want to punch powerfully, the power of your steps is the key. Does the force come from the ground? Li Tian was thoughtful. And it can make your attack more fluid. Cowboy said with a chuckle. You should have seen a similar scene. It is completely different for ordinary people to hit fixed piles and those who know martial arts. One punches stiffly, while the other punches very smoothly. This is the difference in pace. Importance. Cowboy said with a chuckle. That's true. Li Tian nodded thoughtfully. The way you want to learn, the pace is also the key. At any time, the footsteps are like nails, one step out, neither big nor small, neither too light nor too heavy. If the steps are messy, then you are not far from losing now. In the so-called martial arts, both feet are the battleground. Cowboy explained. Is that so? Li Tian was thinking, trying to wave his fist to feel the movement of his feet, and then his eyes lit up, and he didn't notice it when he didn't pay attention before. But after mentioning this, Li Tian realized that he was casual when punching. The feet have a very clear instinctive force movement. Teacher Cowboy, let's learn from there, whether we are progressing or regressing. Li Tian changed his face instantly, showing a big smile. Li Tian still knows the basics of the basics such as basic steps. Quote. Cowboy didn't react for a while, looking at Li Tian with a bright and earnest smile. He was a little speechless. Let's start with a few basic steps. Yes, this is. Bakugo looked at himself in the mirror, his eyes widened, and the muscles on his face twitched uncontrollably. Bang! Afro head disappeared. QQ. Crack. There was a crisp sound. Bakugo, who had an angry expression on his face, suddenly raised his eyes to the source of the sound, Li Tian's cell phone. Ahem, I forgot to turn off the volume. Li Tian coughed twice in embarrassment, and then quickly fiddled with the phone in his hand. Bakugo stared, his face suddenly burned with anger. quickly delete the photo for me. Delete immediately. Do you think I would like to keep your photos in my phone? Li Tian rolled his eyes and quickly found the phone album to delete the photos directly, but it's been deleted. Li Tian held the phone photo album far away for Bakugo to look at. Drip, drip, drip. Suddenly, Li Tian's cell phone and Bakugo's cell phone vibrated crazily. Bakugo was taken aback, but Li Tian quietly activated the Speed Force and appeared in front of the Best Jeanist office, where Cowboy had already changed into a hero's uniform and was waiting to take Li Tian to the city center for patrol. Best Jeanist firm. Bakugo took out his mobile phone, glanced at it, and Heroes Class A class group of first-grade heroes. Perhaps most of the students have already arrived at Hero's office and started their workplace experience, so the number of people online is not too many, but the durian head has become an obedient head. Kirishima sent out a series of laughing and crying emojis. Kaminari. *O. Ashido. 0 * is less than or equal to. Only Green Valley. 020020. As for Bakugo, he watched the chats of the most troublesome people in the class group and a picture sent by Li Tian at the top. A picture of Bakugo, with her hair combed and her mouth twitching. Li Tian. Bakugo's whole body exploded in an instant, furious, and his neatly glued hair instantly straightened, turning into an afro. Compared to pure fighting training in the training room, actual combat on the spot is more suitable. Walking in front of Li Tian, he said, "After all, it is not a society of fighting martial arts, but a society of quirks. In fighting, as heroes, what we should master is to defeat villains with various quirks." Following behind Cowboy, Li Tian also nodded in understanding. There is also a reason why he didn't pay attention to pace and just wanted to learn routines before. In this society that focuses on quirks crimes, mere melee combat is actually not popular, so he only wants to learn the means to increase his attack power, not because he has a faster dodge pace that can make up for it. Although I'm a little embarrassed to say it, but the crime rate in a metropolis like Kyoto remains high. We should be able to encounter 2 or 3 criminal villains for you to practice on this patrol, but if you say Cowboy, he hesitated for a moment before opening his mouth and said, "You'd better not attack with all your strength. With your speed, if you use all your strength, I'm afraid the battle will end in an instant, and then there will be no training meaning for you." Quote. Of course, it's not that you limit your strength to fight villains, but you need to control it to a degree that allows you to get in touch with villains for combat training, but not to fight against villains cause too much damage, even the speed of civilian casualties, remember, even if it is training, but the opponent is always villains, and we are heroes. Cowboy said seriously. I understand. Li Tian nodded. The meaning of Cowboy couldn't be more obvious. Training is fine, but it can't cause massive damage or cause civilian casualties. Moreover, it can't be too ink-stained. If you have to take a long time to deal with a weak-looking villains, it's easy for the surrounding people to think about the hero's loss of confidence. Robbery. The two had just walked a few streets, when a shrill scream came from the street not far away. Whoosh. In an instant, Li Tian turned into a flash of lightning, and rushed out suddenly. In less than a second, Li Tian passed through the turbulent crowd and appeared at the place where the accident occurred. A strange-looking woman who looks like a bunny man is squatting on the ground, pointing at the crowd in front of her and screaming, while in the chaotic crowd, the figure with her back to this side is grabbing 10 ladies' purses and pushing them away with a grim expression. He ran towards the small alley not far from the side of the street. Robbery. The scene in front of me is clear at a glance. Li Tian quickly appeared in front of the running robber, raised his leg at the opponent's feet, and then cancelled the speed force. Snapped. The robber, who was running wildly, obviously failed to notice the sudden appearance of Li Tian. He was tripped and fell out, and the lady's purse was also thrown out of his hand. It's not a good idea to rob in this kind of place. Li Tian raised his hand to catch the lady's purse in midair, walked towards the fallen robber and said jokingly. He dared to rob within a kilometer away from the Best Jeanist office. This is a tough gangster. The robber, who fell on the ground, gritted his teeth and looked at Li Tian, who suddenly appeared behind him. He was dressed differently from ordinary people. It was obvious that this was not a commoner who acted bravely, but a person who could use quirks. Heroes. Not an opponent. Even if he was being stupid, the robber knew that he couldn't be the opponent of heroes even if it was just an extremely unfamiliar heroes, and according to his plan, once he was delayed, he would be able to do so within a minute at the latest. There will be heroes coming over here. Therefore, the robber who got up ignored Li Tian at all, raised his leg and wanted to rush into an alley, which was his only way out. Don't you have the desire to fight? Li Tian looked at the robber who stood up and ran away and shook his head. Since he didn't want to fight and he was just an ordinary robber, he didn't need to keep it for practice. Whoosh! Golden lightning rushed out in an instant, and circled the running robber a few times back and forth. Exclamation mark. The strapped mugger fell directly to the ground with a bewildered expression. The capture is complete. Li Tian looked at the robber at his feet. The special capture rope in his equipment is made of a strong material that even Nomu can't break free. How could this kind of robber, who looks like a gangster, break free? Open. However, facing the robber at Quirk's position, Li Tian still didn't relax his vigilance. What if the other side's Quirks just managed to break free from the rope? Obviously, Li Tian's vigilance was not wrong, but it was in vain. The bound mugger looked desperate. His Quirks could only make hair explode. How could he break free from this kind of catching rope? In the distance, at the top of the high street lamp, Cowboy looked at this side with a smile on his face, nodded in satisfaction, and let go of his hand aiming at the robber. Cowboy, hero's name Cowboy, Quirks, air pistol, can shoot air bullets from the fingers. 10 fingers are different, from pistols to submachine guns to sniper rifles, the rate of fire is almost the same as real firearms. The robber was taken down, so fast. It deserves it. It's not good to rob from there. Choose here in the heart of Kyoto. Don't you know that there are professional heroes' offices everywhere? It's so fast. I haven't seen that outfit before. Is it the new heroes? It looks very strong. This Quirks looks like the student who won first place at the Hero Sports Festival before. The whole process from when the robber snatched the bag to when Li Tian snatched it took no more than 10 seconds, and most of the time was when the robber was about to flee when Li Tian didn't arrive. At this time, when the citizens saw the robber who was taken down, some people looked at Li Tian in surprise, surprised at Li Tian's speed, and some people looked at the robber who was taken down by Li Tian and made a mockery. However, few people stopped to stop. A small robbery case. There is nothing eye-catching in this world. At most, someone recognized Li Tian and shouted cheers to Li Tian. Li Tian also responded with a smile twice. Li Tian was wearing a light-armored red flash suit and was standing beside the robber waiting for Cowboy. He was not surprised that he was recognized. The Heroic Sports Festival is currently the most watched event in China. There are millions of viewers, and it is normal for him to be recognized as the number one. Soon, Cowboy hadn't come over yet, but the Lady Rabbit person had rushed over and thanked Li Tian. If it is said that in the previous life, this kind of matter might have to wait for the police to come to deal with it and take a few people to the police station to make a statement, then in this world where the crime rate remains high, this kind of small robbery case does not need to be like this at all. In Xiangying's course, he also learned what to do in such a situation. Returning the lady's purse in her hand to Ms. Rabbitman, the other party bowed and thanked again and then left. After a while, Cowboy walked over from the side, and said with a smile. How is it, the feeling of the first Heroes event good Zhao? It doesn't feel like it. Li Tian didn't think too much, and said, after all, this is just a gangster who robs, and the gap between the vicious villains is too big. Robber oh, I'm just a gangster who robs, so I'm sorry. Haha, I'm sure I've seen big scenes, but it's different. Cowboy smiled and shook his head. However, this is the current status of our professional heroes. Although the crime rate in big cities all over the world remains high, but the powerful and brutal villains of the real Quirks are actually rare in the city. Those mice prefer to hide in the corner and quietly wait for the prey to come to the door, so compared to fighting against the villains, we usually patrols are more of a deterrent. Aren't you very disappointed? Cowboy looked at Li Tian with a smile. That's not true. Li Tian shook his head. He knew this kind of thing long ago. Although the crime rate in this world is surprisingly high, the number of heroes firms is also scary. In the land of Neon alone, there are tens of thousands of well-known and unknown heroes firms. Counting, the heroes of various occupations are more than 10 million. No matter how many villains there are, the ones that don't have an exceptional level can't make much trouble at all. Although the crime rate in this world is surprisingly high, the number of heroes firms is also scary. In the land of Neon alone, there are tens of thousands of well-known and unknown heroes firms. Counting, the heroes of various occupations are more than 10 Momo million. No matter how many villains there are, the ones that don't have an exceptional level can't make much trouble at all. As for the so-called popularity rankings, they are simply popularity. Perhaps in the corners of some unknown small cities and villages, there are some bigwig-level characters hidden. Although I dare not say that there is an All Might, but it's easy to find any heroes that can counter Endeavor. As for the appearance of an all-for-one villains, the possibility is too small. Li Tian knows that this world is very big. In this world, there are not many people whose strength is comparable to All-for-One or even All Might in its heyday, but there will definitely be. It's a miracle. No, to be precise, one appeared. All Might's quirks One for All was originally a miracle born from the power of All-for-One. It can be said that Neon gave birth to a character like All-for-One, and two extraordinary monsters appeared one after another. But in Li Tian's mind, a figure appeared involuntarily. Tamura Shigaraki. All-for-One desperately chose to cover and save the disciples. At the same time, he is also the master of All Might and the grandson of Shimura Nana, the former holder of One for All. But with Alpharon's city, Li Tian never believed that the other party was just trying to take revenge on All Might, to put All Might in trouble, so desperately covering up, even he didn't escape, but sent his subordinates to rescue Tamura Shigaraki. There must be some kind of calculation. Li Tian couldn't help thinking. Is it possible? Does All-for-One still see the possibility of becoming an extraordinary villains in Tamura Shigaraki? Thinking of this, Li Tian couldn't help feeling heavy in his heart. Although Li Tian has never seen the later plot, but according to the basic routine of comics, it is not impossible for the villain to grow up in the end. Only, in this real world, is it possible that the battle will be exactly the same as the plot development routine in the comics? Li Tian couldn't help but muttered in his heart. Li Tian couldn't help being irritable every time he thought about this matter, and it was almost becoming his demon. Li Tian, Cowboy's voice came. Ah, Li Tian woke up suddenly and responded quickly. What are you thinking? So preoccupied. Cowboy looked at Li Tian rather strangely. No, it's just the first time to carry out the Heroes event, and I can't help but think of the big battle a few days ago. Li Tian couldn't help shaking his head, thinking about it suddenly. There is a sudden feeling of a world away. I feel, unavoidably, a little dazed. You have a good mentality. Cowboy smiled and shook his head. The battle that day, when several of my colleagues mentioned it, they were full of fear and lingering fear. Some people had nightmares for several days in a row. I'm called a newborn calf not afraid of tigers. Li Tian chuckled and changed the topic. So, if there is any vicious villains, feel free to greet him, and I won't be called Li Tian with a blink of an eyelid. Don't worry, I won't let you deal with this kind of guy all the time. We usually cooperate with the police to capture villains. Next time you come again, I will take you to participate in the capture of villains' activities. Hearing what Li Tian meant, Cowboy immediately laughed. When Li Tian heard the first half of the sentence, Li Tian was still a little excited, and then the second half fell silent. I have to wait for the next time. Li Tian said. Of course we have to wait for the next time. Cowboy said righteously, although you are not weak, you haven't even obtained a temporary license, so unless you encounter it accidentally, you can't participate in the action against villains. Come on, and facing the villains, unless necessary, students will not be allowed to take the initiative to attack the villains. Quote. Li Tian looked at Cowboy with black lines all over his head. Li Tian listened to Cowboy's preaching about not being able to shoot, and was speechless. That guy Best Jeanist definitely did it on purpose, and it was definitely because of his half-forced shooting behavior during the last time with Shen Yi. Amid Cowboy's non-stop preaching, the police car arrived quickly, and after handing over the robber to the police, Li Tian endured the nagging in his ears and started patrolling the city. However, babbling is babbling, but Cowboy's lectures intentionally or unintentionally mixed in some knowledge and experience that would not be found in school textbooks, so Li Tian had to cheer up and listen even if it was annoying. From around 9:30 in the morning, patrolling until 12 o'clock, there were two more incidents. One was robbery, but it was robbing a convenience store on the side of the road, and the other incident was two men fighting because of a woman, and even out quirks. But after all, it wasn't a really vicious villains. Li Tian didn't even need to use the speed force, and simply resolve the incident with Li Tian's three-legged cat skills. And at 12 o'clock, the two ended their patrol and returned to the Best Jeanist office. And after a while at the office, Li Tian saw Bakugo, who used at least a whole bottle of hairspray to fix his new hairstyle, but Li Tian didn't have much mood to laugh anymore. 2.5 hours, a full 2.5 hours, the time that Cowboy stopped was only a handful, except when the case happened. It was almost like Green Valley fell into his own world and kept chattering. He had never seen such an eloquent one. Lunch at noon is quite sumptuous. Li Tian also just found out that the so-called Buffet Alliance is actually divided by city. As long as you don't eat some nationwide chain cafeterias, you'll be salivating. JPG. Hey, bide noon. Class A of Shangying's first year has almost arrived, even for the workplace experience in the most remote practice firm. Everyone also ushered in what is by no means a relaxing week of workplace experience. In the afternoon, Best Jeanist, Bakugo and others went out on patrol this time. As for Li Tian and Cowboy, they went to a gym. Cowboy said before that although Li Tian's body muscles are well exercised, there are still some parts that have not been exercised. Obviously, he has not learned the perfect exercise method, so he is going to guide Li Tian in the correct and comprehensive way of exercising his body. Your previous fitness method, although the muscle strength you exercise will be great, it will also destroy the body's flexibility and coordination. It is not suitable for people like us. The exercise method I am teaching you now, although the muscles you exercise are not, it won't be very powerful, but it can exercise the entire body without leaving any dead ends, stretching and exercising. Cowboy looked at Li Tian and said in a deep voice, "The muscles you exercise will destroy the coordination of your body." Li Tian was taken aback, remembering that when he asked Shoji to exercise, Shoji had indeed told him that his training was pure strength training. Shoji's tentacles are inherently able to replicate all of its own organs, and are extremely flexible, so no matter how much muscle is exercised, it will not affect its flexibility, so it only needs to keep exercising muscles. But, after he learned that set of exercise methods, he started exercising at a super fast speed. He has been exercising in an accelerated way for a long time, and he has not seen his muscles getting bigger and affecting his body coordination. What Li Tian forgot is that every day, he not only uses super speed to exercise, but also uses super speed to run. The distance of thousands of kilometers every day is a real long distance running. The effect of exercise is definitely better than the 10 minutes of fitness. Too much. In addition to practicing Zama step and right fist in the seawater up to the neck for half an hour every day, under the impact hammer of seawater, the muscles of Li Tian's whole body are not so easy to become stiff and blocky. On the machines in the gym, Li Tian is training under the guidance of Cowboy, not only various machines, but also a considerable amount of unarmed exercises, after a whole set of exercises. It took Li Tian half an hour to do a complete set. Fitness is a way of exercising that needs to be persisted for a long time. Now I am teaching you that these exercises must be persisted in order to achieve results. Here are 3 complete sets. Cowboy clapped his hands and gestured. I had a short contact with Li Tian, although I didn't know much about it, but I could see some of Li Tian's temperament. I didn't think Li Tian would not be able to persist and choose to give up, so he simply reminded him a few words and didn't emphasize it again and again. Then, lying on the ground, Speed Force lightning flashed in Li Tian's eyes, and Speed Force quickly penetrated his body, wrapping Li Tian's whole body and pulling him into the world of Speed Force. Start accelerate. That. Cowboy looked dull. Standing by Li Tian's side, watching Li Tian, who was lying on the ground surrounded by golden lightning, fell into a daze. Before he could react, Li Tian got up and started other exercises after finishing the simple push-ups. Freehand exercises and exercises that require equipment. Half an hour, a whole set of training that took half an hour to complete. Li Tian only spent 30 seconds to complete all of them. This is because when exercising on the equipment, Li Tian needs to be careful not to let the equipment be affected by the reason super speed workouts are broken. Otherwise, at most 12 seconds, Li Tian can complete a whole set of training. Seeing Li Tian, who was transformed into a series of golden lightning bolts, shuttle and exercise on various equipment in the gym, not to mention Cowboy, even the other people around looked at this side in bewilderment. Seeing Li Tian exercising at super high speed, everyone felt as if a tornado of magnitude was blowing up. Cheating, you are cheating. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.